the item, Coulter Press, and the Wachusett Chamber of Commerce. If you don't mind, I'm going to go through the candidate forum rules first, and we'll try and maybe just review this quickly before each different group of candidates comes up. So each candidate will be allowed 2 minutes to give an opening statement and then 2 minutes to answer each question. Megan, who is sitting right there, texting away over there, will hold up a yellow sign to indicate a 30-second warning. She will then hold up a red sign once the full 2 minutes are up. Please be considerate and wrap up your questions at this time. If you do not complete your thought after the red sign is held up, Megan will ring a bell to signify the end of the discussion. If that doesn't work, Megan will just run up and
cut off the microphone.
Cut off the microphones, right. We're going to go alphabetically to determine who will answer the first question. We will allow the other candidate to answer the next question first. All right, and for everybody, please note that this is a forum for the candidates to discuss the issues of the region, not a debate. We ask that all candidates stick to the topics and not attack other candidates. We request that the audience limit any hooting or hollering or any inappropriate behavior. Any interruptions or prolonged applause will mean that a candidate will have a reduction in time to answer the question. Also, the audience will be allowed to ask questions of the candidates. Index cards and pens are available in the back of the hall for you to write down a question. Actually, they're in the front right next to Megan, who will be holding up the yellow and red signs. If you need a card or a pen, please raise your hand and one of our volunteers will help you out. And then if you could bring the question back to Megan, and then she'll bring them up here. If you already have a question ready for us, again, please raise your hand. We'll pick that up. Each candidate will be allowed 2 minutes to answer audience questions. Megan will hold up the yellow sign to indicate a 30-second warning and the red sign once your 2 minutes are up. Also, please note we won't be able to get to every question. We've already gotten a few up here. The time is very limited, and if we can get to the audience questions, we will. Okay? All right, go ahead. I don't know if that was on the agenda. The Pledge of Allegiance? You're going to? Sure. Flag of the United States of America, and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you very much. Okay. So the first forum we have is the 1st Worcester District Senatorial seat with Senator Harriet Chandler and William Higgins, Jr. So first we will start with Senator Chandler, who will give us a 2-minute opening statement. Senator Chandler.
Good evening. I want to thank the Wachusett Chamber of Commerce, the Clinton Item, and all parties responsible for making this forum possible. I've been honored to represent you in the past, and I hope to continue to represent you in the future. However, I am sick and tired of the negative rantings, ravings, and mudslinging attached to this campaign, and the time has come to set the record straight. Nothing is worse than distorting facts and slandering an opponent's character, morality, and integrity. I want to mention only a few of the false allegations that have been made. First, I have never voted to guarantee myself an annual raise. I was not yet in the legislature in 1994, the last time the legislature voted itself a raise. Then in 1998, legislative salaries were brought before the people of the Commonwealth as a referendum that was passed by a 2-to-1 vote to tie legislative salaries to the state's median household income. The legislature did not pass this constitutional amendment. The voters passed it. I should also state that on 3 occasions, I have refused to take the guaranteed raise. One was during the recession of 2003, and again during the current recession in 2009 and 2010. I felt I could not take a raise when so many people in the state were suffering financially. In addition, I have taken furloughs, which are unpaid work days. Second, every part of my life as a legislator is public record. There are strong enforceable laws setting limits on what a legislator can receive as gifts from lobbyists, unions, and political action committees. Every contribution and every expenditure must be transparent, identified, and is carefully audited. From the first day I ran for the House of Representatives until today, My campaign fund has been managed by my treasurer, a certified public accountant. He is the sole person who has power to sign my checks, and I can assure you that he has never paid out any checks for my personal expenses, and I don't have any check signing authority. And the $1 million I supposedly have taken from lobbyists, special interests, and unions is absurd, as is my supposed tripling of my salary. The people of Clinton know me well, and while you may not always agree with me, you know that my vote has never been for sale. This is the kind of lunacy that keeps good people from getting involved in politics. Hopefully tonight we will finally stop the slander, the character assassination, and the libel, and talk about the issues that concern you.
Thank you, Senator Chandler. Mr. Higgins, please. Mr. Higgins.
Thank you very much for inviting me today for the Chamber of Commerce. The main reason why I'm running for the senatorial district is because of the corruption, the patronage. All you have to do is read any newspaper, from Boston to Worcester to Springfield, and you can see the corruption and how they've all voted together as the Good Boys Club. My second thing, when I'm elected, the first thing I'm going to do is roll back the sales tax and the income tax to 5%. This economy is killing everybody. I have neighbors that have been out of work 2 or 3 years, and we're taxing them. Third thing, I'm going to eliminate these office expenses that all the legislators use. They're guilty of just using our money. And fourth, I'm going to roll back our salary from what it is right now to $30,000 a year, because the legislators only work 6 months. And the last thing, I would ban using campaign funds for travel, for telephone, for liquor, for meals, or what have you. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Higgins. The first question will be for Senator Chandler. Senator Chandler, in the coming term, can you identify the one major issue facing your district and how you would specifically address that?
There's no question in my mind that the one major issue is jobs in the economy. Jobs, jobs, jobs. Everyone from Clinton here in where we are right now, to Paxton, to Princeton, to all of my cities and all of my towns. This is the major issue, and the way we're going to deal with it is to build an infrastructure we've already started to do this. We have put into place a large new state hospital, which will be state-of-the-art, that is putting 400 people to work every day in the building construction trades. These are people that would not have jobs otherwise. We are making sure that we are helping small businesses to have the best opportunities they can to be able to deal with health care costs. We are trying as hard as we can, and we have done this over and over again, to make sure that we have we've taken economic stimulus money, we have saved jobs that would have otherwise been lost, and I assume that we will continue to do that as we go forward. This is a tough time. It's a tough time not just for Clinton, not just for Massachusetts. This is a global problem that we feel all across the country and all across the world. And frankly, if we had a magic way of solving the problem, we would have solved it long ago. But it's complex. You don't have short bumper sticker kinds of answers to how to solve this. We work together and we do the best we can. Thank you.
Thank you, Senator Chandler. Mr. Higgins, what specific measures will you be filing and are supporting to stimulate economic recovery in the district?
Well, I told you the first thing that I would do, I would bring back the taxes for businesses. I would eliminate them, probably, not eliminate, but half of them. If you tax people, if you raise the sales tax, which they've done, if you raise the liquor tax, that's a double, yeah, people are going to be hurting. That's the first thing that I would do. Second thing, I would make sure that the city of Worcester would receive money for the Spanish-speaking people. I've talked to Judge Lopez from Webster, and he mentioned 48% of all the students in the Worcester school system are Spanish-speaking. Of that 48%, 10% graduate from high school. And of the 10% that graduate from high school, only 2 ever graduate from a vocational school or colleges. So that's one of the things that I would do.
Thank you, Mr. Higgins. Okay, so I had all these rules for the candidates, but there were no rules for the moderator, who has already screwed up what we're doing here. Mr. Higgins should have had a minute to respond to Senator Chandler.
all right.
Why don't you take another minute now to respond to that, and then Senator Chandler, if you would, you could respond to
all right,
Mr.
I'm sorry.
Higgins. I got it now.
You don't raise taxes. It's very easy to sit up here and say, okay, we'll increase the sales tax. I would like to see, I would never vote to bring it down to 3%, but I would love to see it, the first thing, 5%. That's the main thing. If you bring down the sales tax and the income tax, then you shouldn't have any problem. All you have to do is look to New Hampshire. I think their unemployment rate is like 4%. We're 9.6. So I would knock down some of these taxes.
Okay, and Senator Chandler, if you
Thank you.
want, yes.
You know, it's an interesting thing when you can simplify something as simply as my opponent has just done. To look to New Hampshire, how often do we think about going to New Hampshire to have heart surgery? How often do we think about going to New Hampshire to have any serious issue taken care of? We don't. That's not the way it's done. We have a very educated workforce here. We have to do job training and more job training, and we have to make sure that the job training matches the jobs that are available. We have to continue to put more money into what am I trying to say? The biotech industry, which is a very important industry for us. It's the future for us. We have got to keep going with the Massachusetts manufacturing programs in which we go to work, help to retrain people to get the jobs that do exist. These are all part and parcel of a larger plan to make jobs possible, to make ourselves productive, and to make ourselves economically viable.
Thank you, Senator Chandler. I'm going to look to Megan. Megan, I have several audience questions. Do I have time for? Okay, so before we started, several members of the audience gave us some questions. So we're going to start with Senator Chandler, and then a
Did you
response.
just start with me?
No, the last question was to Mr. Higgins, and then we did the 1-minute responses. So this is from the audience. Please discuss public transportation from Worcester to Clinton. The WRTA has pulled out, the Russian Icon Museum moved in, and Tim Murray has broached trains from Worcester to West Boylston via Clinton to Air. Basically, I guess they're asking about the public transportation from Worcester to Clinton.
Well, this is a serious issue for us, and this is one that I've been working on and fighting for a long time, and I think I know who asked the question. Public transportation has got to improve. I have been the person who was the founder of the Transportation Caucus in the legislature, a caucus that was able to get the state to put their own goodwill behind the transportation authorities, so that they are able to borrow now, which they formerly were not able to do, without this bridge loan that they used to have that cost several $100,000 a year. We also have been able, the new transportation secretary under Patrick Murray, Jeff Mullen, has also gone out and found and done what I had asked to be done earlier that had been ignored, which was to take advantage of transportation money that was available for toll roads, and we are now getting money from that, which makes a huge difference. We have smaller buses now, so it is a lot cheaper to run those buses. We're trying to make them be able to be responsive to people and their routes. Trains, I think what the Patrick Murray administration has done in terms of bringing trains and more commuter rail to Worcester is incredible. I mean, absolutely incredible. So we will see more trains, and that will make a huge difference. And we've got to get people to start using those buses and using those trains, because that is what we need to make this go forward.
Thank you, Senator Chandler. Mr. Higgins?
The senator talked about transportation. and the toll highways. If you lived in the south of Boston or the north of Boston, it doesn't cost you anything. If you live west of Boston, you have to pay the tolls. There was a referendum in the year 2000 to eliminate the tolls. She's talking about transportation. I wouldn't even worry about it. I'd try and bring in plastic companies, small companies, but with a dozen people. That way, you'll have a lot of the growth in Massachusetts is going to come from small companies, not large companies. Thank you.
Thank you.
Can I respond to that?
Well, that's the 2 minutes and then the
Okay.
1 minute. You'll have the closing statement. Another question? Okay. This one will go first to Mr. Higgins.
Thank you very much.
Green energy has potential benefits, but high startup costs. Do you feel it is important to promote green initiatives, and how would you, as a state official, propose a partnership so communities can do this without bankrupting themselves?
Green energy is a great theory. In Northborough, we have the wind farms at the Tukas Farms. I've been out there. There are so many parts. Somebody told me there are like 3,200 parts in these windmills. What's going to happen after 10 years? We won't be able to use it. It's great to talk about green energy, what the president talks about, but it's not a good idea to get people back to work today.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Higgins. Senator Chandler?
I believe in alternative energy. I believe in the future of green energy and greening. And we have such a wonderful example here in Clinton. We have the solar panels that have been put up on the Water Street apartments that some of you know and some of you live in. It's going to make a difference in the cost to the people who live there. For those of you who know David Dunn and his company, Dunn & Company, you know that that company is totally heated by geothermal power. I think that's wonderful, and the cost of that is almost nothing. It's negligible. I would suggest to you that I'm working with the town of Northborough, where my opponent lives, to try to put in place windmills, wind power, which will make a difference as well. I don't believe that they're going to break it, these parts are going to fall apart. That's 10 years from now, and by that time we're into another generation of technology, and I guess it all depends on whether you believe in the future and whether you believe in technology and whether you hope that it will work, because we have bright young people with great minds here who are working on things like this.
Thank you, Senator Chandler. And you two are doing such a good job of answering questions. We're going to give you one more question and then do closing statements. Senator Chandler, this one's first to you. Do you support the state's $500,000 reimbursement to the MWRA, and why?
I have supported that reimbursement with my colleague, Representative Naughton, who is sitting right down there, ever since I came in. That is my #1 priority in my budget every year. That is our way of saying, thank you, we are sorry that we actually buried half of your town in terms of building the reservoir. That is our way of saying thank you for the sacrifices you people in Clinton have made. Will I do it in the future? Of course I will. I have told them that I will remove everything else, that is so important, that $500,000 to the budget of this town. It's also a promise that was made a long time ago, and we intend to keep that promise. Thank you.
Thank you, Senator Chandler. Mr. Higgins?
In France, Germany, England, they have atomic power. In Plymouth, I don't think the United States has had a plant in 20 to 30 years. The Senator talked about green power. I agree. I lived in Boston. I lived beside the railroad tracks, so I know how much smoke and what you would receive. But the atomic energy is the thing of the future, and for some reason the United States and our government are just afraid of using that.
Okay. Now we'll do closing statements. Senator Chandler went first on the opening statements. Mr. Higgins, 1 minute closing statement.
Probably I'm going to repeat myself. You open up any newspaper, the Boston Globe, with the Telegram and Gazette, and every single month you would find some senator going to jail, speakers of the House. Mr. Norton, since you mentioned his name, I bet you voted for the last 2 speakers that had to resign in disgrace. So I'm just running down these things, dropping the salary. They only work for 6 months. They should only get half salary. I could repeat myself. My wife always tells me I repeat too much, but that's the main thing.
Thank you, Mr. Higgins. Senator Chandler.
Thank you for giving me this opportunity tonight to speak with you. Since my election to the Senate in 2000, I've successfully made the $500,000 reimbursement for the town from the MRA my #1 budget priority, and I will continue to do so. When the flooding occurred in Clinton earlier this year, I was out here working with your local town, state, and federal officials to ensure that every resource available to the town was being utilized. When Governor Romney attempted to close the Clinton courthouse, we worked together to keep that facility open, knowing what a hardship it would have been for the residents of Clinton to commute to Fitchburg and to commute to Worcester for their court cases. I've worked with you for the purchase of the Rauscher Farm and the resolution of the Nestle water issues at Weeki-Peeki. I've been proud to sponsor many local events, such as being a gold sponsor for these last 10 years for Clinton Old Home Days and youth sporting leagues. And just over the weekend, I celebrated Bernie McGrail's 90th birthday at the Old Timer. I love Clinton, and I ask you to disregard the smears and accusations of my opponent, which are totally untrue, and let's go forward together. I ask for your vote on November 2nd.
Thank you. Welcome back to the Wachusett Chamber of Commerce Item Coulter Press Candidates Forum. Next is Mr. Kurt Hayes, a Republican from Boxborough, who's running for the 37th Middlesex District seat. The incumbent, Jennifer Benson, was not able to attend. So what we're going to do is we're going to act as if she is here. And we're going to let Mr. Hayes do his opening statement. And then we're going to ask him a couple of questions. And if the audience has any questions, the same procedure as before, raise your hand and we'll get you an index card. So without further ado, Mr. Hayes,
thank you.
I turn it over to you.
All right, thank you very much. I would like to thank the Wachusett Chamber for sponsoring this, along with the Item Coulter Press, and to Gary for moderating. This will be a little bit easier for Gary to moderate, since he doesn't have to keep track of too many candidates responding, since I'm the only one who decided to be here tonight to address your questions. Again, my name is Kurt Hayes. I'm the Republican challenger in the state representative race, and the district is comprised of a portion of Lancaster, Lunenburg, Shirley, Harvard, my hometown of Boxborough, and a portion of Acton. And what I'm usually asked is, I've been holding town hall meetings all around my district throughout the summer and through the campaign, where I let voters come and ask me any question they'd like. Usually the first one is, why is it that you're running for state representative? And there's 3 key reasons. First is, I have 3 young children, and like many folks out there in the district and around the state, I'm very worried about the future that we're preparing for them. I want them to be able to stay here in Massachusetts and live and have a good job, a good paying job, and be able to thrive. But I'm worried very much about the future that we're leaving. Massachusetts being second in the nation in the debt load that's put on our children, facing challenges that we're all going to face together. Things such as a $22 billion unfunded pension liability, a $2.5 billion budget deficit next year, as federal stimulus money that's been used to pay salaries and balance the budget is going to go away. I'm also running because I tend by nature not to be a bystander. Hopefully my wife would attest to this around the house, my employer and colleagues, where I've been in the private sector for 20 years at IBM, as well as in my community. When I saw a need to do Lyme disease awareness and education after our family was afflicted with it. So I saw there was a need, I stood up and started serving the community by doing events, spreading awareness, helping get legislation passed in the State House to protect doctors and Lyme disease patients. And finally, I think my background that I've touched on from the private sector, the 20 years in the real world of business, will help provide balance up on Beacon Hill. Not just in party affiliation, but also in the type of people that we send up to the State House to represent us. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Hayes. We're going to ask you the same question we started with the other candidates. What would you say is the major issue facing your district And what are your plans to specifically address that issue?
Okay. Well, clearly, I think everyone up here is going to talk about the number one issue is being jobs. And you have to look at the options that you have on November 2nd. If you're happy with the way things have been done the last couple of years, you have the option to re-elect incumbents. If you want to go in a different direction, you have a new crop of leaders, challengers like myself, that are going to take us in a different direction. Myself, I find it unbelievable to listen to leaders up in the State House, from the governor to the Senate president to the House Speaker to my opponent, tout a survey that says that Massachusetts is the 5th most business-friendly state in the country, when I would believe, and so does everyone that I talk to around Massachusetts, that really we're the 5th worst. When you look at studies done by small business and entrepreneurs, they show that we're in the bottom 5, not the top 5. So we need to do some things here in Massachusetts to help our small businesses compete for jobs. We need to take the overly burdensome regulation and simplify that. When you have 100 different agencies dealing with 1,000 different permits, registrations, and rules and regulations around just running a small business, we make it too hard for those businesses to thrive and to grow jobs. So we have to take real action in simplifying the regulations, and as well as creating a more tax-friendly environment for businesses so, again, they can thrive, and the private sector will create those jobs that we need to work our way out of this economic crisis.
Okay, thank you. Whether you are a Democrat, a Republican, or an independent, there are times when you need to put partisan politics aside to work with your fellow legislatures for what is best for the region or your district. Across our region, we have towns that have 2 representatives or senators. Central Mass legislators have worked with a cross-party group in its caucus. If you are the winner of this election, do you feel you can work across party lines for the best interests of your district and Central Mass?
Okay. That's a great question. Absolutely. For those that don't know my history, I was an independent all my life, and I first ran for elected office in 2007 as an independent in the 5th congressional seat when Marty Meehan decided he was going to leave in the middle of his term, because at that point I saw a real need for independence up on Capitol Hill. But being an independent who stood up from among the people to represent that 50% plus of the voters who were independent, I ran into some real hard facts of life, and that is you need to be in a party if you're running at the state or federal level. I am proud to be a Republican candidate running for state representative. The tenets of fiscal discipline, personal responsibility, individual freedoms are all things that resonate with me, and I think to get Massachusetts back on track, it's going to be the Republican Party that's going to lead the agenda of deeper reforms in a more business-friendly environment. But having said that, we definitely do need to work across party lines. Republicans are not going to be in the majority in the House or in the Senate. We might have the governorship and at least a veto-proof situation. But there are many items that we work on in the state legislature where, yes, we're all in this together, and it's not about partisan politics. It's about what we do in the business world. We come to the table, my colleagues, my business partners, my customers, and we all have our own motivations, but we come to the table looking to solve a problem. And we've seen too much of the partisan bickering in the State House. And when you have 90% that are held by one seat, we need to get more balance up there, have honest and open discussions about these challenges we all face together. So I will certainly look to reach across the aisle to help benefit the future of Massachusetts if I'm elected state representative.
Thank you. I will ask you one more question.
Okay.
And then we'll go to closing statements from all of you.
Boy, this goes quick.
We'll ask you a green energy question like the first group. Green energy has potential benefits but high startup costs. Mm-hmm. Do you feel it is important to promote green initiatives, and how would you, as a state official, propose a partnership so communities can do this without bankrupting themselves?
Okay. Yeah, I mean, we all, whether we're Republicans, independents, or Democrats, the Democrats would like you to think that they're the only ones that have conservation in mind and care about clean energy. We all do, but we do need to take a dollars and cents approach to that. Green energy is not going to be the industry that moves Massachusetts forward. It's just too small. When you look about how much of the budgets, half of the state budget and half of and a good deal of the percentage of our economy is in healthcare, financial services, high technology, higher education. We don't need to put all our eggs in one basket on green energy. We need to do things in a way that makes sense financially. We can look at Cape Wind right now, which is looking like it's going to be much more costly than anyone thought. And we need to look practically at having cleaner energy sources, what we already have, more clean coal, nuclear, also move forward with the renewable energy sources, but do it in a smart way. And also realize Massachusetts is not the only state that's out there competing for green businesses, biotech. All the other states are doing that as well. So I'm more of a broad base, let's make ourselves more business friendly, whether they're manufacturing, high tech, financial services, and green. Let's let the rest of the country know that Massachusetts is open for business by making us a more business friendly state.
Okay. Thank you very much. And now a 1-minute closing statement.
All right, thank you. Now, I appreciate the time. It goes quickly when you're up here at a forum with yourself, but there's a couple things I'd like to point out. Everybody up here tonight, whether they're an incumbent or a challenger, is probably going to tell you that they're an independent voice. And you have folks that are incumbents. They're going to talk a lot about the reforms that they've made. I ask you, whatever your district is, look at the voting record of your incumbents. If you want more of the same, which was minor reforms, closing the most obvious loopholes in pensions and ethics, loopholes that were put there by the single party. And then what did they do? They raised your taxes. We have a $2.5 billion budget deficit next year. We're all in this together. I would ask folks in my district, look beyond the rhetoric. Look at things like the endorsements of the candidates. I'm not endorsed by unions and special interests. I'm endorsed by a taxpayer watchdog group. I will look out for the taxpayers. My opponent has a 7% rating based on votes. I'm endorsed by the National Federation of Independent Business, the voice of small and independent businesses. My opponent has a 38% voting record. Also, I was very happy just recently to pick up the endorsement of the Telegram and Gazette. And most of you know that that is a good opportunity that doesn't always happen when you're a Republican challenger. So they see something in me as a candidate. They see me bringing the balance that we need on Beacon Hill as far as not just party affiliation, but also the business experience, and go to apply that to the challenges we face in Massachusetts. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Hayes. Massachusetts Chamber of Commerce, item Coulter Press, candidates forum schedule. I have a little request to make before we start the next forum. If you have your cell phone on, please turn it off, put it on vibrate, or as Pat McIntyre tells me, we are a pager-friendly auditorium. So, but please, if you have your cell phone on, could you please turn it off? Okay. Our next forum includes Representative Harold Naughton Jr. and Mr. James Gettins. This is for the 12th Worcester District. It includes Clinton, Precinct 2 in Sterling, Precinct 2 in Lancaster, and Boylston. Don't want to forget Boylston. We're going to start with the opening statements. Representative Naughton will go first. 2 minutes for you.
Gary, thank you very much. I want to thank the Wachusett Chamber of Commerce and the Coulter Press and the item for putting on this event. I also want to thank my alma mater, Clinton High School, for hosting it, and congratulate. I want to thank my alma mater, Clinton High School, for hosting this, and congratulate Superintendent Terrence Ngano and Principal James Hastings for putting together a great program, and for a great job that they do for their students. I'm proud to have graduated from Clinton High School, and the foundation for success in life provided me by this institution and by so many others in this town. And I'm proud to have born and raised in this town and in this area. Right now, my wife, who's also from this town, is with her Cub Scout troop, taking care of my youngest son and his friends and teaching them skills and values. Our area has also always had a special quality of life stemming from the courage, integrity, and hard work of our people. Ellen and I would choose nowhere else to live and raise Harrison, Tiernan, Claire, and Eamon. We learned from the struggles of our parents. As we look at the hard work ahead in the coming months and years, I'm committed to continuing to do all I can for this district and its residents. There may be more challenges in store for us, but I know that together we can get through anything. I thank you.
Thank you, Representative Naughton. Mr. Gettins.
Mr. Hartner, thank you for moderating, and I wish to thank the Wachusett Chamber of Commerce and the item for hosting us here tonight. I'm Jim Gettins from Sterling. I'm the Republican candidate for state representative in the 12th Worcester District. I'm running on behalf of all ordinary citizens and taxpayers in the district, tired of paying ever higher and more taxes, fees, and health insurance premiums stemming from one-party manipulation of our State House. I have some examples of how bad it is in this state. The Labor Department just reported that Massachusetts lost 21,000 jobs in September. It just revised the figures for August to show a 3,000 job loss in August, contrary to representations made by the Murray and Patrick and Murray administration. Why are we losing jobs? Chief Executive Magazine conducted a survey of 651 CEOs across the country who placed Massachusetts in the worst 5 states in the union for doing business. A DCI survey in 2008, also of executives, placed Massachusetts in the worst 5 business climate states in the country. And the reasons cited were high taxes, unpredictable tax policy, and anti-business regulation. And that all stems from this one-party domination of the State House, catering to public employees and patronage hires at the expense of the rest of us. On October 14th, the State House News reported that we have a $900 million shortfall in the state pension system that was not divulged to investors during the summer when the state issued new finance obligations and refinanced some obligations to the tune of $500 million. That's misrepresentation, folks.
Thank you, Mr. Gettins. Before we start with the questions, if you could hold your applause to the end, please. Before we start with the questions, I do want to remind the audience that if there is time, we will take audience questions down with Megan here. There are blue cards and pens. You could fill those out and give those back to Megan. So our first question is going to go to Mr. Gettins. You may have already hit on this, but I'll ask it anyway. What would you say is the major issue facing your district, and what are your plans to specifically address that?
The major issue is jobs, and our poor job situation stems from incompetent, reckless spending issuing from State House policies. And as these surveys indicate, the Chief Executive Magazine survey, the DCI survey, and a Pioneer Institute survey that just came out in September 2010. Executives either don't want to locate here or are looking to leave. The Pioneer Institute survey indicated that executives think the climate here is getting worse. We cannot create jobs unless we roll back taxes and we roll back anti-business regulation in the state. We also have to deal with what the Sunshine Review reports as a $61.5 billion state debt. We are paying for that debt, and we are paying for the interest on that debt. And we cannot continue these same failed policies. We need balance in the State House to reinvigorate the business climate here so that we can create jobs. Again, roll back taxes, roll back fees, roll back health insurance premiums stemming from the failed mandatory Massachusetts health care plan of 2006, and improving the business climate by repealing anti-business regulations. You should see the code of Massachusetts regulations, folks. It takes 3 or 4 shelves this wide, and none of them were promulgated with a pro-business attitude in mind.
Thank you, Mr. Gettins. 1 minute for a response.
Sure,
Representative
thank you,
Naughton.
Gary. You do more research, you can find as many studies and statistics as you want. The Suffolk University Beacon Hill Institute, also a very conservative institute, rates Massachusetts as the 3rd most competitive state in the country. So compare the various studies how you want. What we need to continue to do is continue to help businesses like we have in this district, Nitro-Mold, Nitro, Injectronics, Parker Phillips, Precision Instruments over in Boylston, Genzyme, St. Gobain, where we've helped with tax increment financing, mass opportunity and relocation and expansion grants, and employment and training grants, such as was used at Injectronics. We need to keep those coming to the community, building up jobs in our community, expanding the commercial tax base while providing more jobs. We've been very successful with that in the past few years, and we need to continue down those lanes. This past year, we did an economic development piece wherein several of the state economic development agencies were combined under one to get rid of, to increase transparency and get rid of redundancy so that companies only have, to an extent, one-stop shopping to find these grants and support that they can get from the Commonwealth to expand their companies. We need to keep along those lines. Healthcare costs. We came forward this year and passed a small business healthcare bill that will reduce small business health insurance costs and promote job retention and job creation, making it more predictable for employers as to what they're going to have to pay in health care for their employees. So we continue down this road, providing predictability and transparency to potential employers, to potential job seekers, and to potential job providers here in the Commonwealth, and it'll be the road to success.
Okay. Thank you, Representative Naughton. This next question is, we'll start with the representative. There are some who argue that lowering the sales tax would help bolster the economy by keeping more money in the pockets of consumers while keeping people from shopping over the New Hampshire border. There's a ballot question asking to roll back the sales tax from 6% to 3%. What is your position on the sales tax? And if elected, how will you vote on reducing the sales tax?
Sure. I think you're asking two different questions in that what we've heard mostly is that the people are going across the New Hampshire border, oftentimes for liquor and for cigarette sales, and I've come out publicly that we should roll back the sales tax on liquor, on alcohol, on cigarettes. The House didn't vote on that. That was a Senate vote that came to us in a conference committee report, and I think that would help certain of the small stores around here, but mostly up around the border. As far as rolling back the sales tax to 3%, that may overdo it. As has been said several times here tonight, we are looking at a budget deficit next year. The sales tax rolling back to 3% would add to that. Towns like Clinton could lose well over $1 million, actually about $1.4 million if that sales tax rollback goes through. What we need to do is work it back towards 5%, put more money in the pockets of our citizens so they can go out and spend it. We will work, that's what I say we need to do, is work it back towards the 5% where it was originally.
Thank you, Representative Naughton. Mr. Gettins?
I support the 3% sales tax rollback. I gathered signatures for that petition. If we're facing a $2.5 billion budget shortfall, it's because these irresponsible legislators of the majority party, comprising 90% of the seat holders, spent one-time federal funds without any view to the future. And now they're saying that we should pay the price for their irresponsibility, and I say no. I've had enough. You've had enough. The Beacon Hill Institute came out with a study on the 3% sales tax rollback. And you can read the study. It just came out in October 2010. And what it says is it's a dynamic study. It's not a static study. The rollback will increase economic activity and job creation. And unlike what the politicians are saying, that it would cause a $2.5 billion revenue loss, that study says it would be $1.48 billion revenue loss, but again, dynamic because it would stimulate the economy and job growth, and they project a $17,000 job growth as a result. They do say that we might lose about 10,000 unessential or non-essential state employees. I say fine, lose them. Let's put them in the private sector, the dreaded private sector, so that they can fend for themselves the way the rest of us ordinary folks have to. And let's roll back some taxes and fees.
Thank you, Mr. Gettins. How are we doing on time on questions? We good? Okay. The next question, we'll start with Mr. Gettins. Each district has multiple towns in it, often with divergent needs. How would you walk the line between two communities when what is best for one community might not be best for the other? And can you give an example?
I frankly can't think of an example, except there has been this ongoing dispute in Sterling or Sterling Clinton about the Weeki-Peeki dams. Clinton's under a state mandate to repair the dams. Some selectmen in Sterling have expressed concern about the safety of the dams. So that's, I think the choice is clear in that instance. Since the state has mandated that Clinton repair the dams, Clinton ought to repair the dams. That's right now the only example I can think of.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Naughton?
Actually, Mr. Gettins has said a little bit more than that. In the Meeting House News, the Sterling Meeting House News last week, he suggested that the town of Sterling sue the town of Clinton for the money to fix the Weeki-Peeki dams.
I didn't say that. I said for a court order to have the dams repaired.
Well, regarding the costs and solutions for the Weeki-Peeki area of Sterling, the candidate, Mr. Gettins, says that dams can be repaired by filing a lawsuit against Clinton, which is obliged to repair them under Massachusetts law. It's in print.
Okay. All right, there were other examples, but...
Okay. On that issue, though, after discussions with the town of Clinton is in compliance with everything it needs to do up to now. It's at stage 2 surveys of those dams and working with the Mass Office of Dam Safety, and we'll continue to work as a Commonwealth to try to come up with funding to repair those dams. Suggesting that one town you're going to represent sue another town, bring litigation. Mr. Gettins is an attorney. He knows that the only people that win during litigation are the attorneys. You should bring towns together, not try to get them to sue each other.
Our next, please hold your applause, please. This next question is for Representative Naughton. Representative, can you give 2 or 3 examples of times when you voted against your party's leadership because a bill may have been detrimental to your constituents?
Sure. I voted against party leadership on requiring requiring the Commonwealth to require everyone who's coming in and getting state benefits to provide verification that they are not illegal immigrants. That was just this year. I have constantly voted against the Boston area crowd in trying to fund and worked against the Boston area crowd in funding the Wachusett Reservoir monies that come to the town of Clinton. That is a constant battle with the MWRA to provide reimbursement to this town for the monies that this district is owed and due historically. That's added up to over $14 million over the last several years, as well as the entitlement to water coming from the dam and the sewer treatment. So those are fights that I'm constantly having with the Boston area crowd to get what's due my district.
Okay, Mr. Gettins?
Yes, sir. First of all, I'll just go back and say I didn't advocate suing Clinton. I said if the Sterling selectmen are really concerned about the dams, they could sue Clinton. As for Mr. Naughton's representation about voting against illegal immigrants, what really happened was last year, fiscal 2009, he voted for all state benefits for illegal immigrants, and now that I'm running against him, this year he voted against them. So he flipped on the issue because he has opposition.
Okay, Move on to closing statements. Mr. Gettens, 1 minute.
I know Mr. Higgins said that he might repeat himself, and I probably will too. I just want to say that I'm the candidate of the ordinary citizens and private sector taxpayers in this district who are absolutely fed up and tapped out to the max. The House leaders right now know that there's a budget shortfall for this fiscal year already. They've been asked to reveal the numbers before November 2, Election Day, and they won't, because they don't want us to know how incompetent they are, and they don't want us to know how much they're going to increase taxes and fees this year after the election. If you elect me, I will bring transparency to these proceedings, and I will fight for you and make all efforts to roll back your tax burden, your fee burden, your regulatory burden, and your health care premium burden. The Massachusetts mandatory health care scheme of 2006 has resulted in more than twice the initial projected costs. You as taxpayers are now paying $1.3 billion for that program, in addition to the highest premiums in the country at the family and small business level. That has to go away too.
Thank you, Mr. Gettens. Representative Naughton.
Thank you, Gary, and thank you to the item in the chamber and Clinton High School, as I started off saying. We live in difficult times. People are concerned about jobs and mortgages. You know, as of the end of September, the unemployment rate in Massachusetts has come down to 8%. At the beginning of the year, it was 10.4%. But you know something? That doesn't mean anything to somebody who still doesn't have a job. I know about these concerns because Ellen and I live in this town. We share these experiences with family and friends. We have concerns for the future of our children. What I respectfully suggest to you is that we need an experienced leader who's in touch with the needs of the people who live in our towns. From the devastating ice storm of December 2008 to the terrible floods of this spring, I've been in the houses, I've been in the neighborhoods, I've helped clean up. I've seen how people were affected. I've been in people's homes, trying to carry on my efforts to make people's lives a little bit better. One of those fights that I'll take with me forever is the fight to continue those benefits, our historic benefits in the Wachusett Reservoir. I believe I know these towns, these families, these neighborhoods better than anyone. Other than being a father and a husband, the most honored position I've ever had in my life is being your state representative. I ask you to allow me to continue that. Thank you.
Can we have a hand for both candidates? Thank you. Okay, we're going to take a couple-minute break, and then we'll be back with the first Worcester District Chamber of Commerce item called to press, Candidates Forum. We are now into the fourth hour of our telethon. Please keep giving, everybody. No, it's just trying for a little humor there. Okay, this is the first Worcester district seat, and this district includes Sterling. The candidates with us tonight are Democrat Kenneth O'Brien from Holden, Republican Kimberly Ferguson from Holden, and Independent John Long from Holden. Excuse me. So what we'll do is we will start and go in alphabetical order with giving opening statements. So Ms. Ferguson, you win the straw.
Thank you. I don't mind being first. Thank you to the Wachusett Chamber of Commerce and the item for putting this event on tonight. In an effort to be brief, here's what I will bring to Beacon Hill: experience, leadership, and change. 11 years of experience, 3 on the school committee and 8 on the Board of Selectmen. I served on numerous subcommittees and boards, and I've been chairman or vice chairman numerous times. A commitment to the taxpayers. I'm the only candidate to sign the Taxpayer Protection Pledge and to be endorsed by Citizens for Limited Taxation. Experts agree we don't raise taxes in a recession, but yet Beacon Hill did. A commitment to small business. I'm proud to be endorsed by the National Federation of Independent Business Massachusetts, and I will fight for small business. Massachusetts needs to be more business friendly. I've always known and believed that business creates jobs, not government, and that business runs best when left alone by the government. Over 70% of all jobs are created within small businesses, and there are over 27 million small businesses in this great country. I fully agree with leading economists that you don't raise taxes in a recession, and that money is left in the hands of people, it's best left in the hands of people who earned it. When people have the money, they spend it, and in turn, others receive that money and will do the same. Massachusetts is in constant competition with other states, and when the legislature raised the sales tax and added it to alcohol, it was then dubbed the New Hampshire stimulus bill. When the legislature failed to allow or failed to come to an agreement on the casino bill, we continue to have a Connecticut stimulus bill, with thousands of people going into Connecticut to spend their money. I believe that more money for schools and cities and towns will come from responsible spending and a stronger economy. I also bring a commitment to all Massachusetts voters to bring common sense and courage to Beacon Hill. It is out of touch and out of balance. I won't support the status quo, starting with the first vote that I will take for Speaker. You cannot have change and reform if you support the business-as-usual regime. I've always taken my role in public office seriously. I show up on time, I do my homework, and I listen before making a decision. I facilitate, I don't alienate, and I work with others to get the job done. I am independent, competent, and professional. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Ferguson. Mr. Long.
I wasn't the greatest speller, but I figured I was next. Thank you all for giving us this opportunity tonight. For those who don't know me, I'm John Long, and I'm running to represent the 1st Worcester District in Boston. My siblings, my father, my aunts, my uncles, my cousins, and I have all lived in the 1st Worcester District our entire lives and loved every second of it. We have all been, or are being, publicly educated in a regional school district. And to a person, we all credit this area, its programs, its education, its geography, and its people for making us the people that we are today. We don't go too far. Going to Union to get my BA in political science and an MBA are about as far as anyone in the family has gone from the area. And with good reason. This is simply a wonderful place to live, to raise a family, and to grow old in. Going around and meeting people, I have heard a need for and explained my candidacy as a choice in favor of balance. It's a balance between funding local aid and education while not putting our state budget, and more importantly you, the local taxpayers, under duress. It's a balance between local concerns and statewide problems. It's a balance between vocal advocacy and conscientious decision-making. Problem-solving and well-thought solutions are great qualities in our elected representatives. However, they cannot be drowned out by a go-along to get-along disposition. That's a get-nothing-done solution. On the other hand, this area does not deserve a representative that will simply add to the outspoken double-talk crowd that currently inhabits our State House. Advocating for sound solutions and speaking based on the merit of the idea, rather than just to be heard, is an option in this race. I'm running because we should not have to balance our interests and concerns with those of special interests, of unions, of political action committees. The only mandate for our elected officials should come from the people, not some committee in Quincy, not some lobby in Boston, not some PAC in Lowell. We need to get the hands out of the pockets of our elected officials. I'm running because both parties have sought to separate themselves and bicker at the expense of the average voter. When the parties move farther left and farther right, those in the aisle get left behind. Our elected officials are becoming more divisive rather than unifying, and that's not what this area, our towns, and the people here deserve.
Thank you, Mr. Long. And last but not least, Mr. O'Brien.
Thank you. My name is Ken O'Brien. I would like to, I'm a candidate for this state representative in the 1st Worcester District. I'd like to thank the Wachusett Area Chamber of Commerce on the item for putting this forum on. I am grateful to have the opportunity to discuss issues of importance that confront our communities with you all tonight. I've lived in Holden for more than 20 years. I am married to Maura Matthews. We have 2 children, Jonathan, 14, and Patrick, 13. I earned my political science degree from St. Michael's College in 1986. I am the only candidate that runs a small business, roofing contracting business, for more than 20 years. I've been a member of the Chamber of Commerce, Better Business Bureau, and Northeast Business Trust. You know, I've worked my way through college framing and roofing houses, and I still do that today. This has taught me the value of money, and I understand clearly how hard the economy has been on most people over the last few years. It is clear to me that job creation must be our first and highest priority. The fiscal crisis that confronts budget builders will never be bridged if private sector job creation does not rebound. I hope in this debate to outline some of my ideas for stimulating hiring and creating jobs in our region. My candidacy represents an opportunity for the region to have effective representation in the legislature. In the last 2 years, we have seen an erosion of services in our public schools in all 3 of our regional school systems in this district. As your representative, as I have for a selectman, I will be a fierce and uncompromising advocate for adequate funding for our schools. The very nature of our Massachusetts economy demands this. Emerging industries like life science and biotechnology and the long-established high-tech fields require a highly educated workforce, and continued investments in education must not be put at risk. I have demonstrated leadership, common sense, independence, and courage as an elected official. I have challenged the conventional wisdom when I believed it would serve the public interest. I have broken with my select board colleagues on many occasions when I felt town spending was excessive. I initiated initiated a discussion with a developer to renovate an old school in our town. This led to saving the taxpayers more than $1 million. In my years of public service, I have learned that politics is about fostering relationships to solve problems. I have built the strongest relations with people like Congressman McGovern, Lieutenant Governor Murray, Senator Brewers and Chandler, and my brother Joe, who is now the mayor of the city of Worcester. This has taught me, sorry about that.
Thank you very much. Okay, Mr. Long, we're going to start with you as we keep to our alphabetical agenda. In the coming term, can you identify the major issue facing your district, and how would you specifically address it?
You know, I think the question becomes about the economy. I think everything right now stems from the economy. And we can't fix the economy as state representatives, but we can help as a legislator to make Massachusetts a more conducive environment for business. That includes supporting our small businesses, cutting down the red tape. We have one of the most complicated tax codes in the country for our small businesses. It's not conducive for getting work done. Additionally, offering hiring incentives. Right now, I've talked to too many small business owners, and I work for a small business, who said, you know, we're not doing bad right now, and we could actually take on another employee right now, but when you bring in mandated benefits, it's just too much. Why are we punishing our small businesses for putting people back to work? From a larger scale, from a macro perspective, we need to work with bringing in larger businesses, manufacturing and research and development companies. Those put a lot of people to work really fast, but yet they're moving out of state. We have one of the most talented workforces in the entire country, but we're not putting them to use because of no R&D tax incentives, no manufacturing write-offs. These are simple, sound solutions that put people to work fast, but quite frankly, Massachusetts is lagging behind and not taking advantage of our workforce because of it.
Thank you very much, Mr. Long. Mr. O'Brien?
Could you repeat the question?
I can. In the coming term, can you identify the major issue facing your district, and how would you specifically address it?
Since there are not a lot of large employers, the largest employer in our region is a school system, Wachusett Regional School System. You know, and the biggest issue that's going to confront our district in the coming years is making sure that we have enough revenue coming back to support education services and our municipal government. You know, there are so many things that are unfunded mandates right now that we have to make sure that we have a loud and clear advocate that's going to rail against unfunded mandates with transportation funding for regional transportation for regional schools. We have 3 regional schools in our district. The list goes on and on. Pilot funding, you know, the last debaters were talking about pilot funding, you know, and, you know, payment in lieu of taxes for state-owned land in the towns. We have some of the largest state-owned land holdings in our regional towns, and we are constantly not fully funded for that stuff. You know, the other 2 big challenges we face are containing healthcare costs. You know, healthcare costs are exploding. $1 out of $2 in state government goes to paying for healthcare costs and services related to it. And unless we get a handle on healthcare costs, we are never going to see small employers be able to rebound and create jobs. You know, there's a whole slew of things that I put on my website, www.kenobrien2010.com, where I outline initiatives for life sciences, biotechnology, energy, green job creation. I think one of the easiest and simplest things we can do to foster our green jobs growth is to change school building program mandates to include installation of photovoltaic panels on roofs and to build wind turbines where feasible. I was a guy that championed pushing forward with a feasibility study for a wind turbine project at the Wachusett Regional High School that would make the school energy self-sufficient, and it would reduce the long-term costs for operating the school, and it would provide the school system with a recurring revenue stream, and in addition to which you can have a low-cost source of power for our municipal light departments. Our municipal light departments in the region provide a unique opportunity to test market different projects that can be taken over, that can be initiated by the state. So, thanks.
Thank you, Mr. O'Brien. Ms. Ferguson?
Thank you. Well, I believe that the number one issue is the economy. And again, although we can't just step in and change the economy, we can make some inroads in how to fix it or how to make it more business friendly here. For example, I believe you do not raise taxes in a recession. And what did Beacon Hill do? We turned around and we did that. And that hurt our businesses. It hurt our taxpayers and our communities. And we need to look at things like that and use common sense approaches. So the economy is number one for me because I think when you start working on that and trying to address it through being more business friendly, being more supportive for the cities and towns, things will start to fall into place. And I recently released a 4 cornerstone commitment plan on my own that said the four top issues for me are jobs, the economy, reform on wasteful spending, and local aid. And they're all related, so it's really hard to just pick one. But again, the economy influences all of them. In order to, our cities and towns are starving, and we keep cutting their local aid. We keep, pushing back on the cities and towns, things like unfunded commitments like the Quinn bill. Lottery aid isn't being returned the way it should be. The regional transportation aid is continually cut. And what I look at is things like common sense approaches and reform, things like the Perry Amendment. When you look at wasteful spending, last year they introduced the Perry Amendment, which simply required documentation before receiving state benefits. And that got voted down at the State House. And that was disappointing to me because I see millions of dollars that are being wasted that should be returned to the cities and towns. Again, with businesses, getting back to that, just to wrap up, I think we need to take some aggressive steps to make Massachusetts more business friendly and support our businesses. Things like rolling back the sales tax, the income tax, and the corporate tax to 5%. And that's just a start of the things that we need to do. But we need to look at insurance costs, liability costs, workman's comp, all of that to help our businesses get people back to work. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Ferguson. The next question, we're going to start with Mr. O'Brien. Green space is attractive and improves quality of life, but with state aid stagnant and fixed costs rising, how can you work with communities to pay for land preservation?
Well, the Patrick Murray administration did a whole environmental bond financing program and has preserved more open space than the last 4 gubernatorial administrations put together. We were the direct beneficiaries of some of that money in Holden, when we expanded our Audubon holdings in Holden. I actually worked to raise money, held a couple of fundraisers to actually have the town's commitment of $160,000 to meet the Audubon's match, but that wouldn't have been possible if the state hadn't stepped in and bought the development rights for one particular parcel. So I think that one of the things that has already been happening is that we've done a tremendous job over the last 4 years to preserve more open space than in a very, very long time. That much being said, I think we need to continue to ensure that we protect watershed resources. We have to continue to, we recently did a master plan in the town of Holden and identified critical parcels that create greenways and wildlife corridors. So there's still a lot of work to be done, but the Patrick Murray administration should be lauded for their efforts at preserving open space, and I'm going to continue to be an advocate for those types of programs in the legislature.
Thank you, Mr. O'Brien. Ms. Ferguson?
Thank you. I strongly believe that each community knows what's best for them and is working very hard to preserve open space and the land and the watershed areas that we value so greatly. And as a legislator, I would continue to support their efforts, whether it be through advocating for certain things at the State House for them, for grant money, et cetera, in order to get them back to the cities and towns that need it so much. The problem, again, though, goes back to the economy. If we could have some common sense and reform, I think we would be able to free up some more money to be available for grants and grants and aids to the towns. But at this point in time, we need to start right at the top at Beacon Hill and work on down and try to, again, line up some of that wasteful spending that is going on so we can get the money back for such desperately needed programs for open space and conservation. And again, there is so much, there are beautiful, beautiful areas within our towns, within this region. And again, the legislator's role is to work with the local boards, with the citizens of the town, and really be their voice on Beacon Hill and advocate for their communities. Thanks.
Thank you. Mr. Long?
I've said this before, and I'll say it again, that part of the allure of our area, part of what makes it so great to raise a family here is the open space. Looking outside and seeing your leaves, looking in our district, looking at Wachusett Mountain or our reservoirs. And we've had some successes in the 1st Worcester District in terms of preserving open space. That being said, there are some threats. I look at the 40B, Chapter 40B law, where right now it needs reform. Right now, we are doing too much circumventing local zoning, going into our open space and eating at that, and that doesn't help anyone. That's a reform right away that we need to look at, because we need affordable housing, but we also need affordable housing that gives the people coming in all the benefits of the people that were already there in terms of open space. We also need to support flex use of our open space for renewable energy projects. Some of our neighboring states and towns have used open space and come up with agreements with private sector companies that are working with renewable energy, wind power, to preserve the open space while also developing wind energy in those open spaces. And that's a funding source. That's a way we can keep open space, keep funding coming into open space preservation while also using it, which I think is a great idea. And it's a common sense, logical idea. And those are some of the reforms that we can do to keep this place, this area, our place, a very wonderful place to live.
Thank you, Mr. Long. The next question will start with Ms. Ferguson. There are some who would argue that lowering the sales tax will help bolster the economy by keeping more money in the pockets of consumers. There's a ballot question asking to roll back the sales tax from 6% to 3%. What is your position on the sales tax, and if elected, how will you vote on reducing the sales tax?
Thank you. I'm glad you asked that question, because when you go door to door, that's a big one that people are asking a lot about. I've always been very consistent on my position on question 3. I do not support rolling back to 3%, simply because as a selectman and a former school committee member who sat and looked at the budget cuts that we've had to deal with in local aid and with rounds and 9C cuts, I feel it just goes too far. And I'm very concerned about the deficit that we're going into the next fiscal year with, and the fact that rolling back from 6.25 to 3, to me, is a drastic cut. If it had been to 5%, I would support it wholeheartedly. In fact, if I had been down in the legislature, I never would have voted for it to go from 5% to 6.25%, because I think that, again, during a recession, you never, ever raise taxes. And that's one of the reasons why I was very pleased to take that taxpayer protection pledge. I don't think we should be continually looking back to our taxpayers, our citizens, and our businesses, and balancing budgets on their backs. What I have also said, though, is, I feel that this question was born out of frustration. People are trying to send a message to Beacon Hill. They're unhappy with how things are going down there and that it's out of touch and out of balance. So I understand where the question came from, but I can't support it. I've also said, though, that I will abide by the will of the people. If the people in Massachusetts vote on this and vote in the affirmative, I feel it's the duty of the legislature to act on that vote and abide by it.
Thank you very much. Mr. Long?
I would also vote no on this question, and I use this analogy all the time. I work with private sector businesses. I'm a management consultant by trade, and they always say, should we lower price? Should we lower price? And I say, well, do you have a more efficient way of doing things? And they say, well, no. Well, the same thing going on here with the state, because we're putting the cart before the horse here. We're saying we're going to lower our sales tax, but we don't know where those cuts are going to come. So the question, I don't like over-dramatizing the issue of, like you see in the commercials, of where's the funding going to come from, but it's somewhat true. Is it going to come from schools? Is it going to come from local aid again? So don't put the cart before the horse. Let's figure out how to become more efficient, then talk about lowering the sales tax. That being said, I'd like to see it go back down to 5, but let's do it responsibly. And the other thing is that people who are going to New Hampshire with the sales tax right now are doing so mostly for big ticket items, especially in the southern part of our district in particular. And, well, if it's 6 or 3, it's still, New Hampshire still has 0. So we're still going to go to New Hampshire for our big ticket items, whether it's 3 or 6. So are we gaining a lot of consumers? I don't know out of that. That being said, again, if we pass that as the ballot referendum, I would support it, because that's a step, that's how democracy works.
Thank you, Mr. Long. Mr. O'Brien.
I just wanted to revisit that last open space preservation question. You know, a couple of organizations that have actually endorsed me because of my stand on environmental protection include the Sierra Club, Clean Water Action, and the Massachusetts League of Environmental Voters. In addition to that, I've been endorsed by former Senator Bob Wetmore, who was one of the only senator to ever pass an environmental amendment to the Massachusetts Constitution that addressed open space preservation. So he's been a very strong advocate of mine. And that much being said, I am against rolling back the sales tax to 3%. You know, I too would support rolling back to 5%. I'm going to abide by the will of the voters, though, and if the voters choose to roll it back to 3%, then I would vote to support that. In addition to that, one of the reasons that I didn't choose to support or take the taxpayer protection pledge was the fact that I think that we need to revisit the big dig debt, and I think that we have to start talking about establishing some fair system of tolls around Boston to ensure that people that benefit from that massive public works project actually pay for it. You know, right now, the financing plan includes taking money from future highway funds to finance the big dig debt. And those highway funds are supposed to be used all around the state to build roads and bridges. And that's just not fair. So I think that one of the things that I will support is to roll it back responsibly to 5%. But I do think that we need to restructure the big dig debt and look at how we do that. I think we have to be encouraging mass transportation. We shouldn't be burdening the MBTA with a massive debt load as a result of the big dig. I think right at the time when we want to try to encourage people to use mass transit and reduce congestion, we're making it harder and harder for the MBTA to make it more efficient and more affordable to use the train service. And at the same time, no one on the South Shore, no one coming in the southeast or the northwest corridors pay for the big dig debt, and that's just not fair. You know, when you go over to New Hampshire, at every single toll, at every single exit, you pay a toll, and that should be the way we have it in Massachusetts. We should have a series of tolls that are fair.
Thank you very much. We're going to move on to the closing statements, and we'll start with Mr. Long this time.
Thank you. In closing, I'd like to be as short as I can here, or else I'll get dinged anyways. Thank you for simply being interested in the race and giving us this opportunity tonight. I was reading an article the other day by a fellow named Tom Friedman. He's a syndicated columnist for the New York Times. He wrote that his impression from traveling from coast to coast is that the time is rapidly approaching where the two-party system will no longer be the status quo. His reasoning is that it has alienated too many. Both sides have positioned themselves too far away from the average voter and have become too caught up in maintaining or getting control than doing what is right. He goes on to write that we need real education reform without worrying about unions, real discussion regarding renewable energy without fear of retribution from the right, and discussing the economic climate and business incentives without influence from the left. In reading this, I thought two things. First, I need to hire Tom Friedman to be on my campaign team. Of course, he'd have to take a modest salary cut from what I'm sure a New York Times syndicated columnist makes. But the second serious thought was that this is exactly the platform on which I've been campaigning. We in the 1st Worcester District have this option for real reform and to make a real impact on state politics. This is not Tom Friedman hoping that such a candidate will come along. We have this choice staring at us. I stand before you and have campaigned to something different from the negativity, something different from the special interests, something different from the party and individual bickering. I care too much about this area to watch it settle for the status quo. And I've worked for this area my entire life and simply ask you to allow me to do so on Beacon Hill. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. O'Brien?
I'm not going to read from a prepared statement in my closing, but I want people to know that all three of us have worked really hard to become the next representative. You have 3 good choices for candidate or state representative from this district. I want you to know that I've tried to demonstrate to people how much I'd like to do this job by going door to door all summer long in the evenings and on the weekends. And I think that one of the things that I have found is that people want us to create jobs and do all we can to create jobs. In my small business, I have seen the tremendous damage, uncontrolled health care premium increase, increases are having on people. And I have talked to many seniors who struggle with living on a fixed income and having fallen into the donut hole and having to pay for prescription drug costs out of pocket, and that's encroaching on their quality of life. I will do everything I can to create jobs. I will do everything I can to create transparency and try to restore people's confidence in government. I think the biggest challenge today we have is our own self and our own fear. I think that we have to engage people and try to bring the best and the brightest to solve the problems that we face today in the Commonwealth. And I do believe the heart of the problems we have in business today in creating jobs is escalating health care premiums and a lack of access to credit. We have to help businesses get credit so they can expand, they can have bridge loans so they can conduct their businesses and keep themselves going during these difficult times. Thank you very much for taking time to listen to me.
Thank you. Ms. Ferguson?
Thank you. And thank you, everyone, for coming tonight and for watching at home. Today, I'm asking the voters of the 1st Worcester District to play the role of CEO. They, with their vote, will hire one of us to be the next state representative. The job of state representative, a very serious responsibility, will include representing you in a professional, competent manner, to work with other legislators and reach across the aisle, to facilitate, not alienate, and regardless of party affiliation, to work with others to get the job done on Beacon Hill for the benefit of the citizens of the 1st Worcester District and the Commonwealth. It requires courage and common sense and the ability to be independent and not follow the pack, or that you march in lockstep with a certain group. I have been listening over the years, and as I have visited with the citizens in the 7 towns. People need change. Many of them have lost faith in their government. They are tired of the status quo and want fiscal responsibility and accountability. As a selectman, I've grown tired of the endless budget battles and cuts to local aid, as well as the state not fulfilling its commitments, such as regional transportation reimbursement, lottery aid, or the Quinn bill. I also think businesses, we need to send the message that Massachusetts wants your business and we want it now. And the role of government is not to create jobs. The role of businesses is to create jobs. I will work hard to represent the citizens of the 1st Worcester District well. Thank you.
All right, thank you very much. Let's have a round of applause for the candidates. Up next will be the 3rd Middlesex District seat, which includes Bolton. Okay, welcome back to the Wachusett Chamber of Commerce Item Coulter Press Candidates Forum. Up next is the 3rd Middlesex District seat, which includes Bolton. The candidates are Representative Kate Hogan of Stowe and Chuck Kunowich of Hudson. We'll jump right into it with opening statements, and we're going to go in alphabetical order. So, State Representative Hogan, you're up first.
Great. Thank you so much, and thank you to the Chamber for holding this event this evening. I'm going to start opening by simply saying I'm running for re-election as your state representative because I know that state government can make a difference in people's lives. Other people may have gotten up here and talked about very large issues that expand beyond the state and across the nation. But I want to tell you that a state rep is where the rubber meets the road, where the phone calls get taken, where lives can be helped, where fights can be made for funding, and that's where I sit, and that's where I'd like to be returned with the good grace of the voters of the 3rd Middlesex District. I believe I do a fairly good job at it. I get up every day thinking about what I can do for my district, and many times people call and let me know exactly what I can do for my district. 2 years and a very turbulent economic climate in which you saw a meltdown in the world economy led to very hard choices, and I made them. I'm proud of the votes that I've taken, and I'll stand by them. But more importantly, I will stand by the 3rd Middlesex District and look to their best interests at all times and bring home what I can when I can. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Representative Hogan. Mr. Kunowich?
Good evening. Thank you to the Coulter Press and the Chamber. My name is Chuck Kunowich, and I am the independent candidate for state rep, and I would like to represent Bolton, Hudson, Maynard, and Stowe. As I've been out door knocking, the common question that I get asked is, why are you running as an independent? Well, the answer is, I don't view life as an entree. I view life as an a la carte. I pick and I choose. And I don't have to follow any one dogma. I can do what's right as an independent. The legislature makes its decisions not always on what's best for individuals, because there's a lot of forces at play, particularly their party affiliation. The legislature, when it makes its decisions, ultimately really doesn't care about the people. If they did, they wouldn't raise our sales taxes. They wouldn't make business so expensive as to chase business away. I own a little pet store on the Rhode Island line, and when Massachusetts raised the sales tax, we threw away our competitive edge, and the reason I know this is because my Rhode Island customers tell me so. They no longer shop in Massachusetts because that little incentive we threw away. Basically, everyone, I don't have to tell everyone that we're suffering in the state. Incumbents as well as challengers are all in agreement. What seems to be in disagreement is, how did we get here? And we got here by the decisions made by the incumbents. Ultimately, what we're suffering from is a lack of confidence. The legislature needs to take steps to prove that they mean what they say and say what they mean. And I'm running because I want to instill confidence in people by keeping my word. No more temporary taxes that don't have a sunset clause. No more tolls that are going to supposedly end when the road is paid off. We need to keep our word. If we need to start other financing, that's a different matter, but we must keep our word and demonstrate good faith and confidence. And that's why I'm running, because the most valuable thing I have is my word.
Okay, thank you very much. We'll ask a few questions. You'll have 2 minutes to answer the question and then 1 minute for a response. We're going to start with Mr. Kunowicz. The first question is, what do you feel is the major issue facing your district, and what would you do specifically to address it?
Well, I alluded to it in my opening statement. The words that come up oftentimes when I'm out and about in the district is jobs, healthcare costs, and taxes. But once again, the common thread that pervades through all of them is a lack of confidence. There's no trust in the legislature, and that's what we need to do, because you won't spend money if you don't believe that the money you spend today will be replenished tomorrow. An investor will not take the money and invest it and take a risk and create jobs if he's not confident that not only will he make money, but more importantly, that he'll be allowed to keep his investment. And it's all about confidence. And so the key here is to take steps that show good faith and demonstrate confidence by keeping your word. And that's what I would do. I would make sure that the legislature keeps its word.
Thank you. Representative Hogan?
I think the biggest challenge we're going to be facing next year are going to be around Chapter 70 and local aid. We've come to the end of ARA funding, and that funding really came in at a time when we needed it, and we were able to fill in a lot of our budget over the last 2 sessions with ARA funding that will not be there. And so we look to local aid and we look to Chapter 70 to be troublesome for 2011. It's in the longer term, from those 2 issues, and from that we must address the revenue side of the equation, and we need to stimulate the economic growth. We also need to address the cost side of the equation by finding ways for all levels of government to become more effective and efficient. We've begun doing that in the legislature, and we'll continue to do that as we proceed into the 2011 budget season. We have done a lot of work with small business health care reform, which asks for oversight. It also allows for group buying. It's going to help small business, which is going to help the economy. But we are going to be looking at local aid, and we are going to be looking at Chapter 70. But I will fight for the best possible outcome for our towns to secure adequate funding for public services and the continued availability of quality K through 12. We talk a lot about numbers, but let us never forget that those numbers have faces. And you only need to serve in the legislature a very short period of time before you realize that, and realize it in a significant way. And I can only say that having served 2 years, it was much a process for me of actually sitting there as a legislator and realizing that you are responsible for many people's lives, whether it's senior citizens, whether it's children, whether it's veterans. You are there to make sure that those folks, especially in your district, are well served, and that's my job as a legislator, and that's why I do worry about local aid and Chapter 70 as we go into 2011.
Thank you very much. This next question will start with you, Representative Hogan. There are some who would argue that lowering the sales tax will help bolster the economy by keeping more money in the pockets of consumers. There is a ballot question asking to roll back the sales tax from 6 to 3%. What is your position on the sales tax, and if elected, how will you vote on reducing the sales tax?
The sales tax, if it were taken down to 3% in my district, would cut local aid and Chapter 70 by $4.5 million. I am not in favor of cutting the sales tax to 3%. I think it would be folly on our part. I think it would be devastating to the economic recovery that we slowly have moving forward in the state, and I think if you look at economic indicators, you can see that. We are slowly moving forward. A 3% cut would devastate our cities and towns. And who always picks up the pieces when these things happen? It will increase the property tax. Because when you look at New Hampshire, what do they pay so they don't have to pay sales tax? They pay a property tax that would knock your socks off. Take a look at real estate and see what they tell you to pay every year in property taxes. So I am against decreasing the sales tax, but if it passes in my district and it passes in Massachusetts, I will vote to make it law, and then we will see what it hath wrought.
Thank you. Mr. Kunowicz.
Thank you. I'm in favor of the 3% sales tax. I can tell you that it has absolutely hurt my business and every business along the border. Massachusetts threw away its competitive edge from Rhode Island, Connecticut, New York, and Vermont. When we say that we want to bolster the economy, people spend money that they have. I can tell you my customers' purchasing power has decreased because of the state revenue, but the state doesn't care about that because they're interested in what is best for the state. The wrong question to ask is, where is the state going to get the money? The right question to ask is, what is the state doing to put the money in the hands of the people who will actually generate and bolster the economy? I mean, I get so upset every time I hear that the world is going to end if we lower the sales tax. The fact of the matter is they never talk about all the other places it could go. The police, fire, and teachers that I speak to are angry that they're always being used as pawns in this finance game. There is 2 budgets. There's actually 4 budgets that that the legislature doesn't talk about. The real state budget is close to $52 billion. That is true state spending. And the fact of the matter is that those other 3 budgets, the capital outlays budget, the non-budgeted items budget, they don't talk about those, and they're called the off-budget budget. And I say that we need to bring the off-budget budget onto on-budget so that we can look at it to see what's in there. We need to see, is it duplicative spending? Is it patronage? What's in there? I think we should look at that. We should look at our pensions that we're paying. We should be looking at benefits like take-home cars. I mean, there's lots of places that the state could cut, but they never talk about that because they'd rather scare us into thinking that we're going to lose our local aid. My understanding is out here, out in the burbs out here, local aid represents a very small amount of money per person, and I think that it's being used as a scare tactic.
Thank you very much. Mr. Kunowicz, this next question starts with you. Green energy has potential benefits, but has high startup costs. Do you feel it is important to promote green initiatives, and how would you, as a state official, propose a partnership so communities can do this without bankrupting themselves?
Well, unfortunately, good things sometimes, in order to happen, cost a lot of money up front. I'm on the recycling committee, and I do that because I feel very strongly about the importance of not having trash laying around and keeping the system going. But as always, the legislature takes the money away that was set aside. Those nickels that were set in have been taken from, the unspent nickels were originally sent to promote recycling and the environment, and they've now been taken away, and they are now in the general budget. But we still need to keep an eye on what we're doing for green power, because this is just one Earth. There is no other one, and so sometimes the things that we do make us feel good, but if you really look at the true cost, as I've learned from being on the recycling committee, there's a real cost of energy of washing, dragging the bottles around, the bottle's getting picked up by another truck. The carbon footprint in recycling is actually pretty expensive, but it makes us feel good. So we want to be careful what we're doing, but the fact is we still have to have an eye towards it.
Thank you. Representative Hogan?
Could you repeat the question?
Sure. Green energy has potential benefits, but has high startup costs. Do you feel it is important to promote green initiatives, and how would you, as a state official, propose a partnership so communities can do this without bankrupting themselves?
Well, I find that particularly my communities, much of the activity around the green revolution that's taking place is often taking place outside the purview of the legislature itself. We have programs like Maynard Can and other energy groups in all 4 of my towns where they're looking to save energy within the town itself, whether that's going to be making sure that there's weatherproofing for the buildings of the municipal buildings, or looking to find ways to save money by saving costs. And as we look to green schools and the MSBA offering money back for those schools that include a green component, I see that the towns are stepping up and creating those programs and being able to having those plans handed over. So I see the partnership already exists between the communities and the state, and I think we can do more, especially as the economy begins to improve, to make that partnership stronger, more productive, and ultimately be one of those things that brings us from 20th century thinking into the 21st century. And I do believe that our citizenry may be well ahead of our legislature in that regard.
All right, thank you. Now we'll have closing statements. Representative Hogan, you're going to be up first.
I'm really glad I'm here tonight. I'd like to thank you. I'd also like to thank the 4 towns in my district, Hudson, Maynard, Bolton, and Stowe, for the honor of serving them. I look to the next year to unravel and unroll for the public to see the economic development bill that was passed in the legislature this year. I think it's going to have a tremendous impact on the business environment. We've already seen from some newspaper articles and responses that the business community is seen as very positive and strong by those outside of Massachusetts looking to come here. I see ways to make that even more attractive. I look to unroll various parts of that bill to help our small business community. I worked in small business for 25 years. I well know the toil and the many hats one wears, as well as the payroll that one has to write out every day. So I look forward to the small business bill unraveling, and I look to, or unrolling I should say, and look to see it effective in my towns in particular. I ask for your consideration in your vote on November 2nd, and I look to be a leader in the legislature for our families, our schools, our seniors, our veterans, and all of you in your best interests. Thank you.
Thank you, Representative Hogan. Mr. Kunowicz?
Thank you for your time tonight. As I said, I'm running as the independent. We do things unconventionally, but we do them because we use our common sense, and we try not to spend too much money. Our campaign is probably the best example I can give of running on a tight ship. We ran all volunteers, and the fact of the matter is that we want to run our legislature the same way. When the legislature talks about business programs, they fail to recognize that the real small business doesn't have time to plug into the state programs. They're actually talking about what we call small big business, people who have $500,000 a year in gross. But the fact is that most startups are one-man, two-man operations, and they don't have the ability or the wherewithal to know how to plug into the state, but yet the state makes things more expensive for businesses to run. By creating these bureaucracies, you're actually making it more difficult for small businesses to navigate. So I too am running for families. I'm running for common sense. I want parents to be able to have their own rights where the schools don't tell them how to raise their kids or what to feed them. I want to live in a world that the state knows its place is to serve the people, not the other way around. I plan to bring government to the people, not expecting the people to figure out how to come to the government. So that's why I'm running, and I ask that you consider me for November 2nd.
Thank you very much. Let's have a hand for the candidates, please. Next up will be the Worcester Middlesex District Senatorial seat. This is called to press candidates forum schedule. I'll make no telethon jokes this time, as we are into our 6th candidates forum with Senator Jennifer Flanagan of Leominster and Neil Herron of Bolton. Am I pronouncing your last name correctly? Okay. Then I've done my job. What we'll have is an opening statement. We'll start with Ms. Flanagan, since we're going in alphabetical order, and I'll turn it over to you.
Okay. Thank you very much, and thank you for the Chamber for hosting this event. I'm running for re-election because I think that it's important that we have someone on Beacon Hill who truly understands the issues. I've spent 15 years working on Beacon Hill, from everything from an intern to a legislative aide to a chief of staff, then to an elected official, as in the House and now as a senator. And I think the important part of being an elected official is that you are a public servant. First and foremost, you are that person, that first line of defense to state government. And I can tell you, in the 2 district offices that I run, one in Leominster and one in Gardner, we get more phone calls from people who are in desperate times. They are in their desperate part of their lives where they don't know where to turn, they don't know what to do. And as the state senator, I've been able to really address some of the underlying issues of our community. Some of the issues such as substance abuse and local aid cuts, and working with Representative Evangelitis and Representative Hargraves to get the utilities legislation passed once we had that Unitil debacle. Because the issues don't just go away. The issues continue, and simply because they're out of the newspaper does not mean that they're not left on Beacon Hill. You know, I think it's very difficult when people say there's a bad taste in their mouths for elected officials in general, because I don't think that all of us can be grouped in the same categories. I represent 11 cities and towns in the Worcester and Middlesex District, and I am committed to those 11 cities and towns. Some people may say, oh, you're a Democrat, you're in lockstep. My record shows that clearly I'm not in lockstep with the Democrats. I've not been endorsed by the AFL-CIO because of the votes that I've taken. I've taken the common sense votes for my district. This morning I was at a demolition ceremony, which I don't think I've ever done before, that Mayor Hawk and I were demolishing a building that SMOC was going to come in and put a sober house in. And while as a chairman of mental health and substance abuse, I really promote recovery, this wasn't the place to put it. This was not the place that we wanted people in recovery to be, because it was literally 50 feet from a package store and across the street from a local bar. And so together we worked to have this building cut down, and by tomorrow it should be gone, and those in Gardner will understand why. But it's just one of the main reasons that when you talk about politics, you have to come down to the local level. All politics is local. And for anyone who goes up to Beacon Hill with a misconception that you're going to have a lot of power, you're going to have a big ego, they really don't understand who their district is. Because what comes down to is that phone call. When I pick up the phone in my office, people will say, where do I go? Jen, how do I get help? My house is about to be foreclosed on, my family needs help with elder services, my kid can't get special ed services, and we really have no place else to go, and we need someone to help us. And that's what I see my job as the senator. I am that advocate on behalf of my constituents, whether you're a Democrat, an independent, or a Republican. So thank you for having me here today.
Thank you. Mr. Herron?
Hi, my name's Neil Herron, and I'm running for state senator because I don't have any experience on the State House. I haven't worked at Beacon Hill. I've been married 20 years. I have 4 kids. We also do foster care for a few kids right now. And I've had a career of 16 years working at the juvenile court. Now this is, I'm an attorney. I represent people actually much the same as what Jen has just talked about. I do a lot of court-appointed work. I work for people who have nothing, who have no jobs, who are really at the bottom. And they've somehow gotten themselves in trouble with the law, or they've, have dealings with DCF and their kids are in foster homes, and sometimes I represent the kids who are in foster homes. So I'm coming from this from a perspective of running my own business, seeing what I have to do to, provide for my family as far as paying for my own health insurance, and have seen how those rates have skyrocketed in the last few years. And I'm coming at this with the point of view as saying, you know, we need as a state to do something about the economy. And we need to actually do something to encourage job growth. And so I'm looking at it in different ways, but I'm feeling that one thing we need to do, we need to lower the taxes. The one thing I can see about running a business is if you're going to risk your money, if you're going to put an investment in, if you're going to hire an employee, you're going to want to know that it's going to be worth it. So I can see, what I'm saying is if you lower the taxes, I think that'll encourage job growth. I also see a lot of complications involved with running a business in this state. The regulations need to be streamlined, and there's nothing really user-friendly about them. And so there's a lot of trouble with small businesses when they come in, they want to start a business or they want to hire an employee. It's a whole lot of hectic paperwork and bureaucracy. We need to do something in the state to fix that. And of course, with those things, we can't cut taxes without doing something about the spending. And so we really need to get a grip on the out-of-control spending in the government. So I guess that's all my time.
All right, thank you very much. All right, so we'll ask a few questions. You'll have 2 minutes to answer the question and then a minute to reply if the question wasn't directed to you. So Mr. Herron, we'll start with you. In the coming term, can you identify the major issue facing your district and how you would specifically address it?
I think our district, which borders up on New Hampshire, there's 11 towns and cities, we have an unemployment rate that's higher than the rest of the state. And I think part of that is the sales tax that was increased last year. Is driving shoppers into New Hampshire even more than they used to go. Because it's just cheaper to shop up there. And I think, you know, I can understand the legislature wanted to cover their spending last year, so they had to raise our taxes. But what I don't understand is why they don't look at it from the other point of view. Maybe something needs to be done about state spending so that it doesn't cost so much to run a government. I think I can add on to a little bit more about what I first started to talk about, I think the main issue is jobs, is unemployment. I think we need to do something about making a business-friendly environment in this state.
Thank you very much. Senator Flanagan?
Well, I think first and foremost, the economy is at the front of everyone's minds, and how can we create jobs? And what has the government been doing to help businesses create jobs? And I think that's been happening over the course of the last 2 years. We've had a lot of reforms on Beacon Hill. We've had 239 line items cut out of the budget, which is 239 programs that have been cut. We have over 2,400 people that have been laid off from the executive branch. So people are talking to more answering machines now rather than people. And we hear that from constituents. They're telling us that they're upset about it. But what really we need to look at also is our commuters, our commuter rail. You know, we were at the Wachusett groundbreaking last week with the Secretary of Transportation, and that freight that we have on that rail is helping our small businesses. It's allowing additional materials to be brought in to the Westminster area. It's allowing places like Omnova to have, you know, the ability to expand and the ability to create jobs. You know, we've worked very, very close with New England Peptide and Gardner to expand their job so that they have job growth. So little by little, it's happening. And because it doesn't have the front page news, or because it's happening, you know, in spurts, it doesn't appear to be this spectacular thing. But I can tell you that we're working hard on Beacon Hill. You know, we would not have done the transportation reforms where we cut out the Turnpike Authority. We merged all the transportation agencies so that you now can see what's gone on. Infrastructure is a huge part of our district. You know, the Bernhardt Road Bridge, we have Depot Road, we have, you know, the Route 12 that was done, we have Mechanic Street Bridge in Leominster, we have all 117. If you look at the project that's going on there, people are being rerouted all around, they're upset about it. The infrastructure is important. So second to jobs, I think we need to pay attention to how people can get around our district. And that's just part of what's going to happen. Make no mistake about it. I mean, we still have no money in government. Like, we still are going to have to make cuts that we are not going to want to make. And we've already begun to do that. And it's just going to be a continuation for the next couple years. And even the Mass Taxpayers Association, which is a business-funded agency program, will tell us that jobs are important, but the next couple years are going to be difficult.
Okay. Next question is for you, Senator Flanagan, up first. If elected, what specific measures will you be filing and/or supporting to stimulate economic recovery in the district?
That's kind of jumping the gun, making sure that I win first.
No, I said if elected. Did I say that?
Yes.
All right.
What I want to do is I want to continue on the reforms that we have by looking at some of the regulations and tweaking the regulations so that small businesses have an easier time in operation in Massachusetts. I come from a family that's owned many small businesses in central Massachusetts and have found how difficult it is to make payroll. I think it's also important that we take a look at the healthcare piece of it, because healthcare is the #1 priority for people. You need to have healthy workers in order to be productive. We all know this. And so working along the lines of what we started with the small business reform in the Senate, and working along the lines of healthcare reform, and if changes have to be made to do things of that nature. There's no specific legislation that I have that's written, because that doesn't happen for another month or so for those that are elected, but I think it's to continue what we've done. It's important to know that while we've passed all these reforms in the past 2 years, you're not going to see instant gratification. We need to find out if it's working. We need to make sure that our economic development agencies that we've now combined are truly marketing the Commonwealth of Massachusetts and not one area or another. If that's not working, then we need to tweak that. We need to make sure our utility companies are adhering to the standards that we put forth this past year, so that our people who are paying, the consumers of Massachusetts who are paying these high rates, can make sure that they're getting what they pay for and not have no electricity for 14 days. So it's going to be a balance. It's going to be a balance between the economy, the small businesses, the health care, dealing with the budget issues because the ARA funds are ending, and it's going to be tight. I mean, I'm not going to lie. The budget situation that we see in January, from whichever governor we have, is not going to be pretty. And the legislature is probably going to have even less money to handle than what the governor started out with, because of the way that the income tax comes and the way that the sales taxes come. So we're going to work on it for the next 2 years if elected, and we're going to continue to look at what's before us.
Thank you. Mr. Herron?
Could you repeat the question?
I will. If elected, I just want to make sure we get that part in there. What specific measures will you be filing and/or supporting to stimulate economic recovery in the district?
Well, and we've already talked about lowering taxes. And to tell you the truth, there's 3 ballot questions that are going to be on the ballot this next week, and 2 of them are tax related. If the people vote for those, I'll respect that. And those 2 are some tax reductions right there. I just want to, one of the things I will be working towards is if there's tax cuts that are being made, which I'd like to do. I don't, and in the, there's a lot of ads on TV these days about the 3% tax coming down. And they say it's all going to be coming out of local aid. I think that's such it's so dishonest the way they advertise that. Because there's no reason why the legislature can't look at the 600 or so agencies that are in state government and make the cuts there instead of just hitting us in our local communities. One thing I can see that would help our economy and help people who are paying for their own health insurance, paying for their who are self-employed or small business owners, is doing something to healthcare that'll actually make it affordable. And not requiring us to buy it. Right now, our legislature put so many requirements on health insurance companies that only 4 of them are willing to come here to offer insurance. So when I re-up every year for my small business, I don't have much choice. And I know there's more than those 4 companies out there in the world. So I want to see more competition in the health insurance industry, so that it will drive prices down, and it'll make it more affordable. But as it is now, there's so few companies that are actually willing to come here to work with Massachusetts on providing health care. One thing that she's called my time, sorry.
Thank you very much. The next question is also to you, Mr. Herron. As mentioned, the district you're in has multiple towns and cities in it, often with divergent needs. How would you walk the line between 2 communities when what is best for one community might not be best for the other?
There has to be some balance to the way the government works with each city and town. A lot of that comes as local aid, and that's how the state sends money back to you after they tax you. They choose how much goes back to your town. Obviously, it seems that a lot of times cities get a lot more back than the smaller towns. I think a lot of times the government looks at smaller towns and expects them to divvy up more and to pay higher real estate taxes so that they can they can take care of their own services for the most part. But obviously that line, you have to walk a line there. I think there has to be some, well, I'm not exactly sure what I'm saying, but obviously you have to have some sort of balance, a balance there. I can see on one hand, small towns obviously feel a little, I mean, I live in a small town. I know we don't get a whole lot of local aid, but I know that there's places like, is it Lawrence, that the legislature bailed out, sent them a whole bunch of money and didn't manage how they took care of it? Yeah, I mean, there's some places that don't manage their funds well, and they blow it. So I think there has to be, when you're giving out state aid, obviously you have to make sure it's actually, being managed wisely.
Okay, thank you very much. Senator Flanagan?
I think the more important question is, as a senator, how do you walk the line between every community you represent? Because I have 3 cities, and I have 3 very diverse cities between Leominster, Fitchburg, and Gardner. Leominster is doing very well. Fitchburg is trying to be up and coming with some of the initiatives that Mayor Wong has put forward and some of the money in the stabilization fund. And we also have a mayor in Gardner who is very forward-thinking in the plans that he has for urban renewal and what we have to deal with the Gardner Correction Facility. So as a senator, it's important to be involved in each and every one of those communities. It's interesting to say, how do you do it with the towns compared to the cities? Because quite frankly, every one of the towns that I have in my district right now is very different from one another. We certainly want to promote farming that we have in Bolton. We have different problems that we have up in Lancaster, where we want to get more grants because they need sewer. We have Ashby and Townsend, which are really border communities that you walk outside and you're into New Hampshire. So we have to take a look at what the sales tax is or what the alcohol tax is. We look at Lunenburg, where we had to do a $1.5 million renovation to the Pearlbrook Apartments because there was a major fire and there was the necessity to get people back into their homes, even though it was affordable housing. So as a senator, it's my job to make sure that each one of those communities is getting what they need. And in terms of Clinton, I share it with Senator Chandler, it's always a team effort. It's always a team effort. If anyone thinks that we go to Boston and do this by ourselves, they have more of a misconception than they realize, because we cannot work separately from one another. I have 8 representatives that come under my jurisdiction as a state senator, 2 of which were Republicans. Not one time does partisanship come into play when it comes down to helping our communities. One of the biggest examples we have is Unitil. I had 4 communities that were affected by Unitil. There was no question as to the fact that we were going to jump in and we were going to help as much as we possibly can and help the public safety officials, and then eventually change the way that we're going to allow utility systems to work in Massachusetts. When I was in Gardner today demolishing that building with Mayor Hawk, I had said to him, we're doing what's right by the community. So you have to look at every community and not just city or town.
Okay, thank you very much. Senator Flanagan, this question goes to you. Can you give a couple of examples of times when you voted against your party's leadership because a bill may have been detrimental to your constituents?
One of the biggest votes that I took that was against leadership was to repeal the alcohol tax. And it's ironic because as the chairman of mental health and substance abuse, I advocate on a daily basis for programs across the state to help people in recovery and to actually urge people to enter recovery. But I thought it was important because our small businesses need to thrive here in my district. And, you know, I am very fortunate to have a leader in the Senate who understands the diversity. There is no repercussions for voting your district and not voting with leadership. I've done it more often than people realized. And then the other big issue, which I got some flack for, but not too much, was that I voted not to replace Senator Kennedy by appointment. I voted to wait until the election was held before we had someone in Washington representing us, because I felt as though people had the right to vote and that we didn't need to appoint someone to go down there for 4 months when the congressional office could be open and things could have been handled by our other senator. There have also been issues that I've worked against when it comes down to leadership. You know, some of them have been some of the reforms. You know, I voted for education reform, and some people in my leadership didn't because they were afraid of what was going to happen to a certain teachers union rather than another. So it really comes down for me when I'm taking my votes is how is it going to affect my district? How are the people of the Worcester and Middlesex district, the 11 cities and towns that I represent, going to be affected by this? Because quite frankly, nobody from the Berkshires is thinking about what's going to happen to us, and nobody from the South Coast is going to think about what's going to happen to us as they take those votes. You know, we are landlocked, we have high manufacturing, so when it comes down to talking about Gloucester and the fisheries, or it comes down to talking about the whaling industry in New Bedford, it just doesn't compete with what happens up here in north central Massachusetts.
Thank you. Mr. Herron?
Could you repeat that question?
Well, the question was directed to Senator Flanagan,
right,
in terms of, so do you have a response to the question of the examples of times when Senator Flanagan may have voted against her party's leadership because a bill may have been detrimental to her constituents?
Oh, if you want me to comment on Jen Flanagan's voting? Sure.
You can do whatever you want, but
that'd be fine.
In terms of
I think, I understand she's voted now to repeal the alcohol tax, but it was just last year that she voted for it. And so I'm not exactly sure why last year it was a good idea for her to vote for that. Voting to increase the sales tax to 6.25% last year. I know that she voted with her party on that, but that hurt our district because we're sidled up against New Hampshire. And so I don't feel like that vote was really good for our community. I have to say, I mean, I certainly, as far as I go, I certainly don't agree with everything the Republicans stand for. I know there's a lot of times, at least in the past, you've seen Republicans get control of, say, Congress, and they spend too much money, but they do it in a Republican way, and that's just wrong. Because I don't want to be there to side up with Republicans to spend all the money that way. I really do believe that we need to spend less money on government. The government has gotten too big. It's gotten too in the way of our lives. There's rules now about, you know, they send a note home when your kid may be a little bit overweight. They try to tell you can't have trans fats in your donuts. Last year they voted to have us quarantined if we got swine flu. There's plenty of things that the government has just gotten too out of hand on, and so I just would like to scale back that and get it back to be more reasonable. I'd like a government that's efficient, that's in the background, that's not in your face, that's not getting in your way. Thank you.
There you go. You had an answer almost the whole time. Okay. We'll go on to closing statements. Mr. Herron, you can start first.
Well, I certainly thank all of you for staying through everybody else today. Still got a good audience here. But anyway, you got to come down to a decision next week. And I guess you can look at this election two ways. We can either vote to keep the same people in, or we can vote out the incumbents and vote in new people. I'd ask you to consider voting in some new people. I, for one, will be able to bring some common sense to this Senate seat, some real small business experience. I've lived in this community for 17 years. I just want to say that I'll be there. I'll be in the community. I'll hear what you need, and I'll go to the State House, and I'll vote accordingly. Thanks.
Thank you very much. Senator Flanagan?
Thank you very much. You know, in 8 days, we have a decision to make. And I think Neil's right. You have to decide on someone who's going to go up to Boston and who's going to represent your needs. The truth of the matter is, I have been that common sense person. I'm not an entrenched politician that's been elected for 20 years. I have gone up there and I have voted against my party when I felt it's necessary. I voted with my party when I felt it's necessary. I've worked bipartisanly with Representative Evangelitis and Representative Hargraves on issues affecting our district because it's the right thing to do. I think by the fact that, you know, I'm not endorsed by the big unions, I'm not endorsed by a lot of what people would call entrenched agencies, that I go up there and do what's right for this district. I have a list of accomplishments that you can see on my website, from transportation to healthcare to economy to bringing the jobs back to removing agencies from our communities like SMOC that we don't need there and that we don't want in our community, to really working hard on behalf of this district. You know, I don't have the ability, my training is in mental health, and by ethics, I don't have the ability to have that second job and work with the kids that Neil works with, because they feel as though that it would be a conflict of interest because I fund DCF and I vote on budgets that fund DYS and things of that nature. So I work hard for everybody. And I think by opening 2 district offices and maintaining those office hours, we're doing a justice to our district, and that I am working alongside my staff and I'm working alongside the constituents of this district to ensure that we get what we need. So I ask for your vote on November 2nd. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Let's have a round of applause for the candidates. Coming up next will be the 4th Middlesex District seat, which includes Berlin. Thank you. Name that TV theme song with DJ Pat McIntyre, who will be giving away prizes and other things.
Oh, I'm totally going to win.
We've come to the last candidates forum, the 4th Middlesex District, with Representative Danielle Gregoire and Stephen Levy, Stephen of Marlborough, and Danielle of Marlborough as well. So, I think you've been here for a little while. You know the format. We won't have to go through it, but I am going to say once again, for the people who are just tuning in, this is the Wachusett Chamber of Commerce item Coulter Press Candidates Forum, and we move into our last forum. So, you'll each have a 2-minute opening statement. Then we'll ask a couple of questions. You'll have 2 minutes to answer. The other person will have 1 minute to respond. And we'll ask a few questions, and then we'll go to closing statements. So, we're going to do it in alphabetical order. So why don't we start with our opening statements? Mr. Levy, why don't you go first?
Well, thank you.
How does your
I was going to say, not exactly alphabetical, but that's fine.
Did I do something wrong?
Well, Gregoire
G
will come
comes
first.
before L, but you know what? I'm cool with it.
You know
Let's
what?
do it.
It does matter.
Let's roll.
You know, I started off screwing up, and I'm ending screwing up, so.
That's all right.
All right.
Go ahead.
You'll take it? That's fine. Good evening. My name is Stephen Levy. I'm currently serving my 3rd term as City Councilor in Marlborough. My background is in accounting and finance, and I've used that experience at the local level to be a voice for fiscal responsibility, for controlling spending and taxes at the local level. I want to take that message of fiscal responsibility to state government now. Our state faces one of the worst economic conditions it's ever seen since the Great Depression. And yet our legislature has not taken the steps necessary to address those problems and the challenges that are facing our state. Spending continues to grow well beyond our means to pay for it. Our legislature needs to take a different approach to promoting job growth in Massachusetts by creating a better tax environment and regulatory environment so the businesses feel welcome here and are encouraged to come and grow and employ the people of Massachusetts, putting them back to work so that we all benefit. We need real reform in this state, real pension reform and ethics reform, things that have just been window dressed by this current legislature. There are so many challenges that are facing the people of Massachusetts and our state as a whole that our legislature has failed to address. As I've gone door to door talking to people in Massachusetts, they share the same concerns, worried about their job, about raising their family, about paying for college, and all the financial issues that come with that. And they feel that we have a legislature that has not heard them, that has not addressed those concerns. It's time for a change in Massachusetts. I want to be the voice for fiscal responsibility in state government, and I look forward to representing the communities of Marlborough, Southborough, and Berlin. Berlin is actually, I had never spent a lot of time in Berlin, but campaigning there gave me the opportunity to meet some great people and really a great community. It reminds me a lot of the hometown I grew up in down in Texas. These are good folks who just want a simple life and want government to stay out of their life as much as possible. Unfortunately, again, the government has not done that. These are the things that need to change. This is the message I hope to bring to the state legislature, and I look forward to an interesting conversation tonight with the questions that we'll be answering.
Thank you very much. To keep in our backwards alphabet, Representative Gregoire.
Thank you. Well, thank you for having us here this evening. Good evening, and I'd especially like to extend that thanks to the Coulter Item Press for allowing us such flexibility with the scheduling tonight. As you said, my name's Danielle Gregoire, and for the past 20 months, I have had the privilege of serving as Berlin's state representative. I am proud to have spent the past several years working on behalf of the people of the 4th Middlesex District to keep us moving forward. We have accomplished much over these past 19 months, but there is still more work to be done. Our accomplishments on transportation, job creation, economic development, and human services merely scratch the surface of where we need to go to make this Commonwealth a better, more affordable place to live, work, and raise a family. The number one challenge we face as a Commonwealth and as a nation is our economy, but you don't need to hear that from me. What you do need to hear is what I think we can and should be doing to face those challenges head on. This session, I made difficult choices when at the time, the easy answer, the simple answer, and the politically expedient answer would have been no. No to the possibility of any new revenue. No to school funding. And no to providing the most basic of services to our most vulnerable residents. But in my opinion, in that of the constituents I've come across in Berlin, Marlborough, and Southborough, no is not the answer, and no is not a solution. And I work hard every day to find common sense, reasonable, and responsible ways to get to yes. Yes to the highest level of school funding in our state's history. Yes to health care cost containment, small business incentives, and an economic development consolidation that will save the state millions while making it easier for businesses to locate and expand here. And yes to an on-time balanced budget that cut $4.3 billion and included a transparency measure that makes the state budget more easily navigable and available fully online. All that said, I'm looking forward to our discussion here tonight and a way to find solutions to these challenges.
Thank you very much. Representative Gregoire, we'll start with you.
Okay.
In the coming term, can you identify the major issue facing your district and how you would specifically address that issue?
Sure. Well, I think I focused on that briefly. The major issue facing not only this district, but every city and town across the Commonwealth is our economy and its effect on our state budget. And that's more important than ever, given the ballot questions that we face in November. My opponent has gone on the record saying that he supports question 3's rollback of the sales tax to 3%, and I continue to advocate that that would devastate cities and towns. It would devastate Berlin. It would completely derail their project for a new regional high school. It would devastate not only our cities and towns, but it would devastate all services that are provided by the government. This question, if passed, would require nearly $2.5 to $3 billion in additional cuts to the deficit that we're already facing. And those cuts would all have to come out of approximately 50% of the budget, because 50% of that budget is mandated and we can't cut it. So on top of the cuts that we've already made, the $4.3 billion in human services, in domestic violence prevention, in substance abuse treatment, in public safety, and in everything that we do as a Commonwealth and everything that we provide as a state for our residents would be multiplied greatly. So that's the number one issue facing us. And I think in order to solve it, we have to face it head on. We've made the cuts already. We made the difficult decision to raise revenue. Myself, I voted for a sales tax increase and only a sales tax increase. And I think that we did a good job of reaching the middle ground on increasing revenue and decreasing spending. And we're going to need to continue decreasing that spending. As Senator Flanagan said earlier, we're not here to sugarcoat it for anyone. There will be cuts next session. And what we need to do is realize that the way we spend our money and what we spend it on are the two most important things facing our entire Commonwealth.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Mr. Levy.
Well, clearly, the economy is the top issue that faces the state faces in the coming term. But Representative Gregoire and I have different views of how the state should address those. The priority should be focusing on job creation, getting the people of Massachusetts back to work. How do you do that? By creating a friendly business environment, one that encourages job growth and encourages companies to move to Massachusetts to put our people back to work. In order to do that, you need three things. You need sound fiscal policy, sound tax policy, and a reliable regulatory environment. Unfortunately, those three things do not exist in Massachusetts. We have an unpredictable tax policy in the state where, at a whim, the legislature raises billions of dollars in taxes in the middle of a recession, further exacerbating the problems that we have, further driving jobs out of the state. We have an unruly regulatory climate, that one of the worst climates in the state, in the nation. I mean, Massachusetts has the fourth highest cost of doing business of any state in the nation. And that's got to change if we want to keep the jobs here, if we want to keep companies from moving to places like North Dakota and the Carolinas. You know, we're not competitive right now. And we've got to change the environment so that businesses will come here and will put people back to work. You know, in terms of the tax cuts, you know, in my support of question 3, I support question 3 because we need to send a message to the legislature that we cannot continue to tax the residents. We raise the sales tax in one of the worst economic climates, driving jobs out of Massachusetts. You know, there's a reason why the cities and towns that border New Hampshire are losing jobs at a faster rate than other parts of the state, because you can't compete with our border states. By lowering taxes, we'll actually create a better economic environment, creating more jobs, more revenue to offset the loss of revenue from the sales tax itself, by making us competitive with New Hampshire, with Connecticut, with New York. So these are the focuses of the state should have in order to improve the economic climate.
Thank you very much. Mr. Levy, the next question is for you. Whether you are a Democrat, a Republican, or an independent, there are times when you need to put partisan politics aside to work with your fellow legislators for what is best for the region or your district. Across our region, we have towns that have 2 representatives or senators. Central Mass legislators have worked with a cross-party group in its caucus. If you are the winner of this election, do you feel you can work across party lines for the best interests of your district and Central Massachusetts?
I absolutely do, and I absolutely intend to. As a city councilor, we are elected in a nonpartisan way. Yet we know who is more conservative, who's more liberal in terms of their fiscal policies. But we work together for the best interest of the people of Marlborough. In the same way, I would approach the job as state legislator. And particularly because I am a Republican and would be in the minority party, I would have no choice but to work across those party lines. It would be the only way to get anything accomplished in the state, and it really should be the way that the legislature operates regardless. The challenges facing Massachusetts are not partisan issues. They're not Republican problems or Democrat problems. They're challenges that face every person here in the state, and they need to be approached and solved in that way. When I'm elected as state representative, the first thing I want to do, even before being sworn in, is to sit down with the other 159 representatives to talk about what my priorities are and to understand theirs. to get to know them, not only on a professional level, but on a personal level. So we can find those commonalities and the things that we can agree on. Are we going to agree on everything? Absolutely not. But I know at the end of the day, we all have the same objective, which is to help the people of Massachusetts and make this a better place for people to live and work and raise a family. So that will be my approach, to work with them, to find solutions, find things that we can move forward, and think problems that we can solve. And we'll do that in a nonpartisan way.
Thank you very much. Representative Gregoire?
Thank you. Well, I certainly appreciate and admire my opponent's desire to meet with all of the other members of the House, and I didn't realize that he was already running for Speaker before even being elected. We come to meet these people and talk with them regarding issues that are similar, issues that are different, views that converge and that separate us. And I have come to grow a great respect for my colleagues on the other side of the aisle. And one of them in particular I turn to on a regular basis for his advice and guidance on the issues that we face because he's from a similar geographic region. I think that my opponent pointed out that the Marlborough City Council is not partisan, but they in fact do often act in a partisan manner, and it is certainly very clear where those lines are drawn. And I have to doubt his ability to reach out to the other folks because of a lack of flexibility. There's not a big picture view there, and I think that often the way the city council voting goes, it's very much down party lines and sort of a my way or the highway attitude. So I have a proven record of dealing with legislators on the other side of the aisle. I vote with them often, I respect them, and I admire their experience and where they're coming from, and I look forward to continuing that because experience can't be replaced when it comes to building personal relationships, and I've built personal relationships and will continue to foster those personal relationships going forward.
Okay, Representative Gregoire, this question we'll start with you.
Okay.
Each district has multiple communities in it, often with divergent needs. How would you walk the line between two communities when what is best for one community might not be the best for another? And if you could you give an example?
Exactly. Well, I often refer to this district as the mama bear, the papa bear, and the baby bear, with Berlin being the baby bear of the three communities that I represent. We have issues with school funding, and the most important issue that I've come across to point to this, to balancing the needs of the three communities, was earlier this year we were facing an issue with regional schools. And I didn't have any experience with regional schools. As a lifelong resident of Marlborough and as a graduate of the Marlborough Public Schools, I had no experience dealing with regional school districts. So we met with the superintendent of Berlin-Boylston, and we also met with the superintendent of Northborough-Southborough. And when I say we, I mean my colleagues who represent those surrounding areas, so that we could find out what the best way was to help them. There was a proposed disproportionate cut to regional school transportation, and it also affected our vocational school in Marlborough, which receives students from all three communities in the 4th Middlesex District. And I worked with area legislators, Republican and Democrat alike, to find a solution which would tie regional school transportation funding to make it proportional to any cuts in Chapter 70, which is our education funding. So that was the biggest example for me so far. I often find that the issues that we face are regional. We had an issue with turnpike tolls supposedly going up last year, and we were able to stop the turnpike tolls from going up. And one of the reasons we were able to do that was because we balanced some of those bonds with that 1%, with that 1 penny sales tax increase. And we squashed talk of a gas tax, which was not popular to folks from other regions. So I think the communities are geographically similar, obviously, and they have similar needs, but once in a while, the way these communities govern themselves are at odds with one another. And I've been able so far to strike a balance and really grown fond of the folks here in Berlin, the elected officials and the residents. And I think that we have a very open line of communication, and I look forward to continuing that.
Thank you. Mr. Levy?
And I would agree that the majority of the issues that the three cities or towns face are similar issues because there really are macro issues that face all the cities and towns of Massachusetts, and that is the economic climate, but primarily protecting local aid. Protecting local aid should be a top priority, and although Representative Gregoire, when running 2 years ago, said it was her top priority, she's voted 3 times in her first session to cut local aid. I find it interesting, too, that she brings up the question of regional school funding, because when Governor Patrick unilaterally cut the regional transportation, Representative Gregoire was a member of the regional school committee, did reach out to her and ask for her to sign on to a letter to the governor to reinstate some of that funding. But Representative Gregoire's answer was not that she would fight for that and find other places to cut. Her proposal was to cut Chapter 70 across the board in a more equitable way. Again, cutting Chapter 70 funds is not the answer to regional transportation. Whether it be Chapter 70 funds or just unrestricted local aid, that needs to be the top priority. And as a representative, I will work to make that a priority and make sure, and I will never support a cut to that funding. I do want to take a moment and return back to the last question just because I didn't get a chance to respond. You know, Representative Gregoire criticized the way the City Council acts and says that that it works in a partisan fashion. Apparently she's not aware that Councilor Ossing is a Democrat, that Councilor Pope was a Democrat turned unenrolled. It's not a partisan line, it's a fiscal conservative line that we stand by. And the majority of the councilors are fiscally conservative, and that's why we have Marlborough positioned well financially, because we know how to say no to spending. We know how to control taxes. That's what we need in the legislature. That's why I'm running to be the next state representative of the 4th Middlesex District.
Okay. We'll have one last question, and then we'll have some closing comments. We'll ask you about, move off the sales tax and taxes a little bit, and talk about green energy. So, Mr. Levy, green energy has potential benefits, but has high startup costs. Do you feel it is important to promote green initiatives, and how would you, as a state official, propose a partnership so communities can do this without bankrupting themselves?
I think anything we can do to protect the environment, to improve energy efficiency, and to be more green is a worthy cause, and I think the state absolutely should make investment. I don't think we should do it to the detriment of the businesses who are here in a time that may drive businesses out of state. So I think we need to take a balanced approach to that. You know, energy costs are one of the highest costs businesses do face in Massachusetts. It's one of the challenges businesses have to deal with here. So again, it's a balance because we can't go all green and make these massive investments and drive up the cost, because let's face it, green energy is expensive, as you said, particularly in the startup costs. So I think we need to make investment, but we need to do so at a reasonable pace as the economy recovers and as we transition so that businesses can continue to grow and thrive here.
Okay, thank you very much. Representative Gregoire?
Thank you. I certainly appreciate that question and can point to the examples I have of working with the town of Berlin. The town clerk and I are in communication on a regular basis regarding the Green Communities Act and what this town can do to more easily become involved in these kinds of programs that are offered by the state. And I look forward to continuing that discussion with them and helping them do that as they build more housing and as they build more, which sometimes they don't like, but that's okay. I also think that we need to encourage partnership between companies that we have in Massachusetts. Evergreen Solar is one of the largest companies in the world in the production of solar energy and solar panels, and they're right nearby. And I think that if we give them incentive, and other companies like them incentive, to come into our schools and come into our municipal buildings and help us retrofit some of these things to make them more green, more energy efficient, then they get advertising out of it and they grow their business. So I think it's a win-win, and I'm looking forward to finding a way to make that happen in the coming session. And I also would like to go back to the last question because I find it frustrating that no matter how many times I correct my opponent on his distortions of my record, that he continues to repeatedly distort the way that I voted, things that I have said 2 years ago on the campaign, things that I've continued to fight for and advocate for at a state level. It just continues to be completely blown out of proportion and distorted. So I did want to just add that. Thank you.
Okay, we're going to move on to closing statements, and Representative Gregoire will go first.
This race is not about and has not been about Gregoire versus Levy, Democrat versus Republican, incumbent versus challenger. This race is about who is best qualified to do this job, who has already established relationships in this district, and who is already doing the job and understands that how we spend our money and what we spend it on are two completely different things, and who actually has ideas to solve the problems that we face, because they're serious problems. Spouting rhetoric and pandering to voters, my opponent has called for change, but change in and of itself does not a victory make. With 6 years on the City Council in Marlborough to take the lead on job creation, smaller government, and transparency, Steve has failed to take initiative time after time after time. In my first 20 months as rep, I voted on major reforms and consolidation in transportation, ethics, pension, economic development. Equally important are the bills I voted against because I believed that they were bad for this district. Those measures included an education bill that focused on failing schools rather than on how to lift those schools, and a budget that contained too many new taxes. Just as all of my successes are not my own, neither are the failures of this government in the last 5, 10, and 20 years, as my opponent would sometimes have people believe. By his own words, he has no specifics on where he plans to cut $5 billion from our budget should Question 3 pass, as he believes and advocates that it should. Over the past 6 months, one thing has become abundantly clear. There is a vast contrast between my opponent and I and how we do our jobs. I have and will continue to encourage an open, honest dialogue between us, and will continue my community outreach in the best way to represent you and your values. I respectfully ask for your vote on November 2nd so that I can continue the work that I've begun working for you and with you. Thank you.
Thank you, Representative Gregoire. Mr. Levy?
Well, unfortunately, 3 questions and 2-minute sound bites is not adequate to make a compelling case, for one candidate over the other. But what I do ask the voters of Berlin to do is to look at our records of accomplishment and what we've done in our respective roles. I as City Councilor and Representative Gregoire as representative. For the 5 years I've been on the council, I have been that advocate for fiscal responsibility. The representative says I've shown no initiative. I've been at the forefront of controlling spending at the local level. I've been a proponent of promoting economic growth and job creation by approving TIFs and tax incentives for businesses to come and grow in Marlborough. There are bigger issues that we haven't even touched on here this evening. We have a $2 billion deficit, a structural deficit in our state government. We had that $2 billion deficit 2 years ago when Representative Gregoire first went into office, and the legislature did nothing to address it. And as a result, the next legislature will be facing that same $2 billion deficit. The legislature has done nothing about solving the problems that are most challenging Massachusetts, a pension system that threatens to bankrupt our state. They've done nothing about addressing a $22 billion unfunded liability, about changing the method in which we provide retirement for our employees. Ethics reform was mere window dressing and did not address the root problem that we've seen in the legislature primarily, and focused on municipalities that weren't the subject of all the news reports that we've seen. As representative, I want to be the spokesperson for all the people of the 3 towns in the 4th Middlesex District. I will be an advocate. I will be out in the community, meeting with the voters, meeting with the elected officials to understand what their needs are and what it is they need from me as a state representative and from our state government. I will be there to hear their concerns and to address those. I will be the hardest working representative this district has ever seen, and I ask the people of Berlin to give me a chance that we can continue to send back the same people and get the same results, or we can try something new. I'm asking the voters this year to try something new and give me a chance, and vote Stephen Levy for state representative on Tuesday, November 2nd. Thank you.
Thank you very much. If we can have a round of applause for the candidates. I have a lot of thank yous to go through here at the end of this candidates forum. We want to thank all the candidates tonight. We had 7 different forums, and we appreciate all their time and participation in the event. We want to thank everybody who came out and supported your local candidates and getting involved in the community. I want to thank Comcast, Channel 8, Cable, and the town of Clinton for covering the event for those who could not attend tonight. We want to thank the Clinton Public Schools for the use of the high school auditorium. I want to thank DJ Pat McIntyre for providing and setting up his sound system for this event. And